IB Nation, welcome to the Irish Breakdown Podcast. It's Friday Free for All Mailbag. I missed you all very dearly. Let me say this is my first show since Monday. I was supposed to be on the Wednesday show, but of course we had to cancel it on Wednesday. And then Brian had a guest on Tuesday and on Thursday. Did you miss the one yesterday, especially, Brian? I mean, I got addicted kind of listening to you and Tim O'Malley going on yesterday, man. There was a lot, it was cool because there was a lot of like inside jokes, but also great insight. It was really fun, man. That was a good show yesterday. So
Tim is really good. He's really good. He's a good friend and you got a chance to meet Tim face to face. Obviously, you and him sat next to each other at the Syracuse game. Oh, that's right, because you did at the Baltimore game as well, right?
Yeah, Tim's a good dude, man. I got to talk to him a bunch at the Syracuse game, and I met him at one other game. I'm trying to remember which one it was, but it's probably Syracuse and Navy. Those are probably the two games I saw Tim this past year. Yeah. So yeah, he's awesome. I thought the conversation was great yesterday. So if you all didn't listen to that podcast, go and check it out. You probably missed it because you're not subscribed to the YouTube channel. So you should make sure you subscribe, hit that notification bell so you know when one of our great shows are coming up. Hit that like button, all that great stuff before we get going here. Yes, Ryan.
But you should probably explain to people why you haven't been on as much this week and why you won't really be on that much the next couple weeks. Because I actually had somebody ask me, did Ryan get fired? No.
Did they really did.
Yeah. They're just so used to seeing our faces together every single day. So why don't you go ahead and share with people that don't know kind of what's going on and why you're going to be a little scarce the next couple weeks.
Yes, I've been trying to backlog as much content as possible for the next couple of weeks because for people that have been following the channel, they probably know this. So for people that don't frequent as often, baby number 2 is coming any day now. I mean, honestly, I wouldn't have been surprised if they were here already at this point. I'm expecting our second daughter to the family. My wife stopped working last Friday, so it's literally when it happens, it happens. It could happen anytime. So over the next couple weeks, I will be doing the baby thing, doing the husband thing. But don't worry, y'all. I'll be back. This is not a gone forever. This is just I'll see you in a couple weeks type of situation. Yeah. But I will say this. I will get back and we'll get right back on the trail because there's more incredible recruiting weekends that have to be had after that. So we'll not be on the shows as frequently, obviously, and we'll not be on the shows at all over the 2-week span. But I will be back. But thank you all for being understanding.
You may do a show on Monday, depending on how the baby and mom are doing. Meaning, if the baby's not here yet, if the little one's not here yet, then Ryan may do a show on Monday, just so we can kind of extend his paternity leave a little bit closer.
I'm going to try to backlog a couple individual shows over the weekend. If you guys miss my face and my voice, so don't worry.
We got a linebacker show already recorded that I'm going to put up this weekend. Actually, I may put it up Monday, Ryan, for Memorial Day, the linebacker video. So. But yeah, so Ryan's good. Ryan's a good place. Ryan's a good standing. We're good. I just wanted to throw some different things out to you guys this week, and then also give Ryan a chance to get caught up on some things and make sure that if baby came sooner, that we'd be all set. So I'm ready to rock and roll, man. But we're good, and I know y'all missed him, and I miss doing shows with him. So let's get rocking and rolling, man.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I mean, you had a couple of other great guests though on this week. So
I did. I mean, it's hard to live up to the Ryan Roberts standard, and I'm saying that.
I don't know, man. Tim set the bar pretty high yesterday.
I think you and I do great shows together, and so I knew I had to try and do my best. But we also do want to do that. One of the things that we're trying to do at Irish Breakdown is we are trying to get it to where we don't have the same people on every single day. Where Ryan and I Ryan and I are always going to do shows together. We love doing shows together, but Ryan also has a lot of recruiting stuff to do. There's a lot of things I want to do. Ryan. Hopefully, we'll get back to getting Ryan and Sean to do a show together, and me and Ryan and Sean Stiers and I are going to do an afternoon show together here during the summer. Vince is going to be back on with me during the summer when the school year's out. Going to try to get Bill Bender back on, and so that way we just have different voices and different opinions and all that kind of stuff. And that's just so we can make sure that we're never getting stale with our content, and it's just not the same thing every day, and making sure that you guys are getting as many well thought out and well reasoned opinions as you possibly can. So that's a lot of our plans for this summer. But that's not what people are here for right now, Ryan. They're here right now for the mailbag because it's Friday, which means it's Friday free for all. And I love this battle that Nathan Milton and John A1 have now to see who can get in first. And Nathan got it done today. So we're going to start off with those two guys.
Man, and they get it in like an hour beforehand, man. It's absolutely wild. The question from Nathan Milton to start us off today. It has been indicated on IB that Jalen Smith and Brandon Wimbush were used incorrectly. Can you expand on how they were misused?
Well, regarding Brandon Wimbush, I want to be clear. I didn't say specifically that Brandon Wimbush was misused his entire career. I think Brandon Wimbush was misused for 2 games after the Michigan game in 2018 because I feel like the plan was always to go to Ian Book. It was the fact that they just felt they needed Brandon Wimbush to beat Michigan. And you go back and look at the Ball State and Vanderbilt game plans. Those were game plans geared more towards a guy like Ian Book than they were a guy like Brandon Wimbush. What I have said about Brandon Wimbush is Brandon Wimbush was not developed well at Notre Dame. I think Mike Sanford did a really bad job coaching Brandon. I think mechanically he screwed him up. I think he got in Brandon's head a little bit, and I don't think Brandon ever recovered because I remember having a conversation with a Notre Dame coach who was not part of Brandon's first 2 years. He was someone who came on later. And we were having a conversation about Brandon, and I said, hey, I want you to do me a favor. He's like, all right. I said, go back and watch his high school highlight films. And he went back and watched his high school highlight films. He goes, who's that dude? I don't know who that dude is. Like, that's not the Brandon Wimbush that we have because his mechanics had gotten jacked up. He was a very natural thrower in high school. I mean, he was a 70% completion guy as a senior in a very good league.
Yes.
He got jacked up at Notre Dame and by whoever was coaching him at quarterback his first couple years. And so by the time Chip Long and Tom Reese got here, I feel like Brandon was sort of mechanically damaged goods and he could just never get it back. And so that has been my thing with Brandon Wimbush. Not that he was misused. I think that in 2017, he was used exactly how you're supposed to use a guy like Brandon Wimbush. I mean, I think they used him phenomenally in 2017. Throw the ball down the field, run it a ton. And using his legs and using his big arm. So I had no beef at all with how they used him in 2017 or how they used him against Michigan in 2018. And Brandon played a huge role. And I don't think they beat Michigan if Brandon's not the quarterback. I mean, just some of the plays he made, some of the big-time throws he made down the field. Do you remember the 3rd and 17? I think it was Josh Uche. Uche? Is that how you pronounce his name? Comes off the edge, and it's like 3rd and 17. He's got Brandon dead to rights, and Brandon just bounces off the tackle, gets outside, runs for like 20 yards, picks up the first down. Ian Book was phenomenal his first 5-6 starts of that season, but he can't do that against a team like Michigan. That was a pretty good Michigan defense that year. And but once they kind of got that win, they were ready to move on to a different direction, and I don't think they used him well against Ball State or Vanderbilt. But I don't think he was misused. Jalen Smith was misused simply because they didn't let him attack. I mean, that was really a big thing. If you go back and watch those games, basically, as bad of a coach as I think Brian McGorder was, and as dumb as it was to continue to start Joe Schmidt in 2015. And again, you have never heard me say Joe Schmidt had no business starting in 2014. You've never heard me say that. I think Joe Schmidt was actually pretty decent in 2014. He wasn't good, but he was solid. And it made a lot of sense to have him. Once he got hurt against Navy and he lost some athleticism and he just they put him in bad spots. And I don't blame Joe Schmidt for that. I blame the coaches for that. And so they knew that Joe was limited athletically in 2015 from a quickness and speed standpoint and a power standpoint. And so what they did is they'd use Joe to get the calls and make sure everybody else is lined up. And then they'd use Jalen to protect Joe. And so that's why Jalen was kind of used as a cleanup man as opposed to an attacker, someone who would get after people. I mean, the fact that Jalen Smith went 2 years in a row, his last 2 years, including the year he won the Butkus Award, and never had 10-plus tackles for loss, yet Asmar Bilal did that in 2018 or 2019 under Clark Lee, tells you everything you need to know. I mean, Tavon Coney Tavon Coney had 13 tackles for loss as a rotation guy in 2017. As a rotation guy, or excuse me, no, was it 2017? No, he had 12 and a half tackles for loss. Excuse me. Drew Tranquil had 10 and a half tackles for loss in 2017. And so you're telling me that James Onwualu even had 11 and a half tackors for loss. But you're telling me that Jalen Smith.
I forgot about James Onwualu. Yeah. I saw him on a recruiting ranking for Notre Dame the 1 year, listed as a wide receiver, and I completely forgot he was an athlete coming out of high school.
He played his first year at Notre Dame as a wide receiver.
Yeah,
which is interesting. But it was that. I mean, not using him to blitz. The fact that a guy like Jalen Smith, I think he had 2 sacks. I think in his career he had 3.5 sacks in 2014, and then 1 sack in 2015. So 4.5 sacks in that last. I mean, that's just that was just not using him correctly. I mean, how many interceptions did Jalen have his last 2 years? Zero.
Yeah.
How does a guy like Jalen Smith not have interceptions with his athleticism? Because you weren't using him correctly. So that was my issue with that. Is Jalen, I will say, was misused. He should have been used as more of a downhill player, and when he did it, he was pretty good. He was a guy that he had 11 sacks in his career in the NFL. Ryan, you're telling me he couldn't get more than one as a senior? So those are the issues that I had. He was just not allowed to play to his skill set, to attack downhill, to be a really good backside pursuit player, good flow player, getting him out in space at times in certain matchups. He was just restrained, in my opinion, and used to. That's why he had really high tackle numbers. He was in the 90s, I think, both of his last 2 years. I think he was actually wasn't he over 100?
I think
his last year at Notre Dame. It was close, 114 his last year, 69 solos. That's a lot of solo tackles. He had 111 actually in 2014, 114 in 2015. But those were a lot of, think about that, 114 tackles, only 9 of them were behind the line of scrimmage. For a guy like Jalen Smith that could do what he did against Michigan in 24, remember the 2014 tackle for loss he had against Michigan? That was one of the best plays I've ever seen from a linebacker.
He had one of the smoothest celebrations ever, man. The little shark thing, the little shark fin. Fantastic.
Was it and he did a bowling thing and then would do that because he's bowled several 300. So it was pretty wild.
It was dope, man. It was dope.
So I don't know if you want to add to that, Ryan, but that's how I would say he was misused.
The only thing that I would add to any of this conversation, because I think you hit on it perfectly, Brian, is that every once in a blue moon, because you know that Brandon Woodbush is a New Jersey guy out of St. Peter's, obviously here in Jersey. Every once in a blue moon, I'll go watch his highlight tape from his senior year, and I almost start crying because I'm like, that kid. I never got to see that kid at Notre Dame. Never got to see him, man. He was so. I was convinced that Brandon Wimbush was going to be an absolute star at Notre Dame coming out of St. Peter's. An absolute star. He was never that, unfortunately.
No. And I don't really put that on him. I mean, you've got to be developed, right? Yep. I mean, it's very frustrating. Very frustrating. We get down here we got a question from Coleman Smith.
Coleman says, scale of 1 to 10, Notre Dame lands Elijah Rushing. I think, Brian, we did this like 2 weeks ago, and I'm still around the same. I'm like a 3, Coleman. Like, there's a shot because he's coming for an official visit. It'll be his second time on campus, but I don't think it's overly likely at this time. We'll see. Ask me again, though, after the visit, because the visit could obviously change things a little bit. Hopefully it will change things a lot.
I don't remember what I said last time, right? Like a 5?
I think you said 4 or 5.
4 or 5. Yeah. I think they have a better shot than Ryan does, but neither of us are predicting Notre Dame to get him right now. That's all. I mean, it's just more a little bit in where my optimism comes from. It's not even about optimism. It's just more of because he is coming for the official and there's the opportunity. So like Ryan and I see the recruitment very similarly. We don't predict them to get him now. We do think he's a great fit for Notre Dame. He had very high interest early and a visit could shake things up, right? We see it the same way. I think the only difference in our ranking, Ryan, is more of just I'm projecting a little bit towards the visit where you're just going where it is right now. I think that'd be the difference, but let's see how the visit goes. If the visit goes well, I think they'll have a shot. The number could definitely change depending on that visit. There's no doubt about that. Next question from Coleman Smith again. It says, Brian, why does Sean feel better about Justin Scott than you do? I mean, to a degree, you're going to have to ask Sean that question. I don't know what Sean has said publicly recently about Justin Scott. If I can tell you what basically the feeling that Sean and I have, or that Sean has, that has been expressed to me in our personal conversations, and I think he's valid. I think a lot of people believe that Justin Scott is going to commit to Miami at some point this summer. I think most people believe that. I think where Sean is, and I am here too, actually. But it's just a little bit here's where I'll show where we're different. I think Sean and I both believe that he may commit to Miami this summer, but he's going to sign with a Midwestern school when it comes down to it. That's what we both think. My thing, though, this is where I think Sean and I are a little bit different, is that I think right now Michigan is competing is ahead of Notre Dame right now. And now that doesn't mean that Justin doesn't like Notre Dame. It doesn't mean that Notre Dame's not still recruiting him. We've been here before, Ryan. I mean, we were here about this time, not quite this time, because by this time they had gained gotten back in good shape with Christian Gray. But about 14 months ago, we were in a similar position with Christian Gray. And LSU and Ohio State had passed them up. So I'm not saying Notre Dame can't get Justin Scott. I think they can. And I think they have to stay in it for the long haul. And if he commits to Miami, I do not anticipate Notre Dame backing off of him. They're going to stay on him because I think they know at the end of the day that Justin ultimately is I think, going to want to stay closer to home. And I think he should. He's more of a Midwestern kid. But, you're getting down to Miami. You're going out to LA. You've got all these. Oh, I'm getting coached by Hall of Famer and Jason Taylor and all these things that sound great, but I don't know how good Miami's going to be on the football field this year.
Yeah.
And, is this thing drag? So you got to stay on him. You got to keep him a priority no matter who he commits to. That's going to be the key for Notre Dame. I just think right now you've got to overcome 2 schools at this point in time. So I think that's kind of where I'm at. And I think probably Sean and I's difference of opinion comes from more of similar to what Ryan and I have talked about, which is Justin has maintained that he's going to visit Notre Dame in the fall. I don't think that him committing will necessarily change that, although Miami's going to try hard to get him not to visit Notre Dame.
Sure.
I think the relationships that some are banking on, the relationships he has with people like CJ and especially like Cam Williams that are going to help Notre Dame at the end. I just look at it and say, I don't know if it's just going to turn out the way that we think right now. Because again, guys, I can only tell you where things are right now. It's the same thing last year when it was good news with like Keon and Dante. So look, I can only tell you what the situation is right now. I can't predict what's going to happen in 2 months. I can only tell you where it is right now.
Yep.
And where it is right now is Notre Dame has lost some momentum there, just like they had 14, 15 months ago with Christian Gray. The question is, can you get it back like you did with Christian Gray? Because I think Justin Scott's very much a Notre Dame kid, very much so.
Agree.
It's just, when is he going to figure that out? I think he'll fit in very well at Notre Dame. He's got to figure that out. And right now there's, Miami's the hot program for him and for some other kids. That's why I say it's a marathon, not a sprint. And as long as Notre Dame stays on him and keeps him as a priority, I think they'll have a shot to flip him down the road. I just don't think right now they're in a position where they're going to get him. And so if I had to guess, I think Sean and I are projecting. He's projecting a little bit more to what he think will ultimately happen. And I'm just telling you where things are right now. And I don't think Sean would. I mean, Ryan, you and he talked yesterday too. Do you think that I misstated kind of where he's at right now? Right now, he knows that Notre Dame doesn't lead for that kid. He just thinks that when it's all said and done, the kid's going to pick Notre Dame. He could be right.
I mean, let's hope. I mean,
it wouldn't shock me.
I'm right here with this, man, is that, and again, I'm not reading too much into Twitter stuff a lot, Brian, right? Like I'm not, but I saw when the final schools got announced for Justin Scott, he had retweeted and said something like, come in soon or something. And I'm here to say, guys, this is my opinion. If a decision does come soon within the next few weeks or in the summer, I don't think it's going to be Notre Dame. I don't that's where I am with it. Like if it goes into the fall, then that's a better situation, I think, for Notre Dame. And you still recruit him without question, even if he commits to another school. But if it happens anytime soon, I just don't think it's good. Like this, if it happens soon, I just don't think it's going to be Notre Dame. That's just kind of where I am at with it right now. Right. And Brian, you're on mute. I'm sorry. I was trying to tell you.
Yep. The other thing is, I don't think they're going to completely he's going to shut Notre Dame out, even if he does commit to Miami. So, I mean, that's just the reality of it. I think he's going to still talk to Notre Dame and still talk to Michigan. It's just about who can, because it's the same thing, guys. It doesn't matter who you commit to. It matters who you sign with. It's just right now they've got a lot of momentum they got to overcome before they're going to get to that point in time.
Yeah, I mean, you remember when Peyton Bowen was committed to Oregon? No one cares about that anymore. He's at Oklahoma.
Right. He's committed to Oregon for 15 minutes. And no one cares that he was committed to Notre Dame for almost a year, because where did he sign? With Oklahoma.
He's at Oklahoma. Yep.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, because, Brent Venables values commitment so much. Right.
God, that turned me off so bad when he said that, man. I was like, wait, you're preaching that when you're taking kids that are committed on campus right now? Yeah. Like, okay, buddy. Just be consistent. Yeah. I just ask for consistency, that's all. But yeah, sure.
He's full of crap.
We had another question from John A1 who said, which player currently playing safety has the highest ceiling at the position?
I'd probably go Xavier Watts. It's either him or to me, it's either him or Ramon Henderson of the guys that are on the roster right now. I'm not counting Antonio Carter just yet because I need to see him play the position.
Sure.
I have a feeling I change. I mean, I can't give it to one of the freshmen just yet, but it's one of those two. I mean, Ramon Henderson athletically is really potentially very good. He just has to figure out how to play football. Xavier knows how to play football and is a very good athlete. So I'd say right now, I'd say Xavier Watson. Another reason I'd say Ramon is in there is because Ramon is so much bigger than Xavier. I mean, he's 6'1.5". He's a lot longer. He's thicker. So I'd go there, but it's one of those two for me, Ryan.
Ramon Henderson looks like an NFL safety on the hoof. I mean, you see him move around, you're like, that looks like an NFL safety. There's no doubt. I would also go Xavier Watts just because I think there's been an actualization of traits a lot more than there has been with Ramon. I mean, we've been talking about Ramon breaking out for a couple years now, right? And it just hasn't happened. So at some point, you're like, not sure if that breakout's going to happen, guys. I'm just not sure. So I'll say Xavier because not only do I think he's talented, I think that you've also have seen an actualization of traits as well turning into production. So give me Xavier in that instance.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm comfortable going there with you.
Yeah. Next question's from Facilitate Inform. What do you think about Matt Bayless and the state of the strength and conditioning program at Notre Dame?
I think it's outstanding. I mean, I think they have an outstanding strength and conditioning program. As far as Matt Bayless, I think there's things that Notre Dame needs to do more to give him more support. I think the nutrition program needs to continue to get better and better. The players are certainly better off than they were 5 years ago, but they're not where they need to be in relation to where the other top programs are. And that's one of those things the school should absolutely take pride in. And there's definitely a long way to go there. And that is and that's not something that Matt Bayless can control. He can give guys plans on here's the kind of food you need to have and stuff like that. But a lot of these other schools, they literally feed these kids every meal. I mean, you're getting breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, shakes, all that stuff are prepared by the schools, and Notre Dame doesn't do it as much of that, at least as far as I know. Yep. And unless that's changed in the last 6 months, which I don't believe that it has, that's something that they could continue to help improve the Notre Dame staff, which will help with some of the weight gains, weight losses, and things like that Notre Dame has, because there's only so much the strength program can do in that regard. So, but as far as I think Notre Dame is a very strong physical team. I think that when they're coached right, I think it's like when one guy doesn't have what you do in 17 and 18 and 20 and 22 from a physicality standpoint, say, well, he was doing good things that year, but not in 2021 or 19 when the team wasn't as physical. I think that was more about coaching and mentality and culture than it is Matt Bayless's program. Sure. Every year, I had this argument with a buddy of mine. He's like, guys don't get faster at Notre Dame. I'm like, what are you talking about? And he would point to Kyle Hamilton and Kyron Williams. Well, they didn't run good 40 times. I was like, okay, so you're just going to ignore Kevin Austin, Drew Tranquil, Miles Boykin, Chase Claypool, like all these Troy Pride, all these other guys that just blew the combine up. It's like every year there's like one or two Notre Dame guys that just shock everybody at the combine. Wow, that guy's a lot more athletic than I thought. Like Isaiah Foskey this year ran very good times. And he's like, well, Michael Mayer didn't run. So what time did you expect Michael Mayer to run? Ran like a 4.7 flat or like a high 4.6. Like what were you expecting him to run? Like a 4.5? So I don't know where that came from or where that thing comes from, but just some people just, they look to be negative. But I think the strength program is outstanding. I think their power numbers are very good. Yeah. Their bench numbers are usually pretty good at the combine. Their athletic testing numbers are usually pretty good for guys who are athletic. Like Julian Love was never going to be fast, ever. No. But you know what he did? He had very good agility numbers. And that's the signs of athleticism. The vertical jumps are usually very good. The broad jumps are usually very good. All the things that to me factor into do you have a good strength program are things that show up. Plus, I mean, they've won a lot of freaking games since he's been here. Let's not forget that.
I think that's the biggest thing, Brian, is that people just think athleticism is just symbolized by speed, right? Like that's the only thing that matters. It's like people always talk about the 4.59 that Kyle Hamilton ran, but they never talk about the 39-inch vertical and the 10-10 broad jump that he jumped. Like, it was still pretty absurd, man. Like, yeah, his 40 time wasn't great, but athleticism isn't just determined by 40 times. I mean, like, there's different types of athletes, right? Like, it was.
He ran a 6'9" 3-cone, which is pretty good.
It's really
for a
good
safety,
for
a 6'4" guy. Yeah.
Yes. It's just, it's one of those situations. And I was let down a little bit too in the process because I was told by someone close to the training facility that he was going to run a lot faster than he ran.
Right.
And that was a letdown for me. But like in actuality, you're like 4.5 something for a 6'4", 220-pound safety is a pretty good number. Right. And then the 39-inch vert and a 10 broad, that's very, very good numbers. So there's different levels of athletes. There's different types of athletes. So I think we should understand that.
The other thing too is let's not forget these kids spend several months with a specific training program that is the ones ultimately responsible for whether or not their 40 times are going to get better. And so, that's also as much on them as it is Matt Balis. What Matt Balis is doing is, as far as the product we're seeing on the field, is outstanding. It's outstanding. And the kids love him. That's the other thing too, is like, I mean, so they put in the work for him. They absolutely love him. And, I think he's got a pretty good read on the idea of you got to make sure you're not putting certain weight on kids that that could maybe prove problematic.
Too much.
Yeah, you got to be a little careful with that. I think he's usually pretty good about that. Figuring that out, I think, is something that he's usually pretty good at. So
there hasn't been a lot of Notre Dame players over the last couple of years where I'm just like, that guy just had too much weight on his frame. Like, that was just not good weight. Like, usually they're in pretty good spots. I agree with you on that one. I agree.
Yeah. Good question, Facilitate.
Our next question is from Nathan Milton, who says, it has been indicated. Oh, we already answered this one.
Okay. Sorry. I was getting to the next Nathan one.
Sorry, Nathan's got too many, man. Just flooding it. He said, if Justin Scott does not sign with Notre Dame, what would be the reasons you think he would pick another school?
I think it just comes down to, look, I think that I don't want to spend the next 7 months answering 87,000 questions about Justin Scott. I mean, it's what we've said before. Notre Dame allowed other schools to get into the mix when this recruitment should have been shut down before. I'm sure there's things that Miami is saying to him that are very enticing. I don't think this is a deal where like Miami's offered him $1 million. I don't think it's one of those kind of deals. I just think this is a Midwestern kid that's gotten to go around the country, and he went down to South Beach during a great time of the year to be down in South Beach. He left snow in Chicago, goes down to South Beach. Jason Taylor's there. There's a lot of buzz around the program, all this kind of stuff. And I think, they've made him feel really important. They've made him feel like a priority. And the reality is Notre Dame has been very inconsistent doing that. I think this is just my opinion. I think in some ways that and certain people at Notre Dame kind of took Justin for granted a little bit. And I'm thinking of Al Washington here. And then you get back and like, okay, well, we gotta really ramp it up now. Well, now it's too late because you've allowed that stuff in his mind to kind of, hey, maybe I might leave this area. I might go to visit this place, that place, and the other place. And I think that just allowed them to get involved. But we've said all this before. I mean, this isn't new. I've explained all this before, and that's kind of where it is. When you don't close the deal early, and then a kid blows up and becomes this 5-star, and everybody in the country knows him. I mean, Miami's doing a great job. Miami's sending the kitchens. I mean, there was one I was talking to. I think Sean told me this, or somebody told me this. It was like there's one day, like during one of the open periods, where Miami sent like 5 coaches to his high school. Notre Dame went and saw him like once. Like Al Golden never went out and saw him during the most recent open period. Now Marcus Freeman couldn't, but honestly, I would have sent, if I was Marcus Freeman, I'd have sent Washington out there once every week, like every Monday before he goes on the road. He's going out to see Justin Scott. I'm sending Al Golden out there. I'm sending Mike Mickens out there. I'm sending Chancey out there. I'm sending Jared Parker out there. I'm sending everybody out to see this kid. That's what you do when a kid is a priority. And I just think in some ways that they're assuming that Al Washington is going to get this job done. And I don't think he's going to be able to do it by himself. It's going to have to be a more of a group effort, and not just Marcus Freeman either. kids got to be made to feel like a priority, like a major priority. And I don't think he was that for a while at Notre Dame. He is now. They're making him feel that way now, but I think in some ways they took him for granted, and that allowed Michigan and Miami and some other schools to really make him feel important.
Yeah.
And I get that. That's how I was when I was going. Who really values me? Who really values what I can bring to the table? Because and here's why that matters. It's not an ego thing. It's if you value me, you're going to work with me. You're going to be invested in doing what it takes to make me the best player that I can be, as long as I put in the work. But if I'm just another guy that you're recruiting in my position, then you're not going to be invested in really doing what it takes to make sure that I can be the best player, person, man I can be. Every kid should feel that way during the recruiting process. Who values you the most? That's how every player should be talking and thinking and feeling. It's not an ego thing. Because if someone truly values you, then they're going to invest a lot into making sure that they do what it takes to get you ready to go play football and play football at a high level. That's why it matters.
I think Justin's a big relationship guy. I really do. So I think that for me, it's just one of those situations where Notre Dame was late to the relationship building process. They had a chance to close, but I think that then there was a realization of like, hey, let's take a step back. And once that step back taken, it was about which program is going to build the deepest relationships. I don't think this is an NIL thing, right? Like, is that involved at all?
Yeah.
Sure. Yes.
It is.
But I don't think that this is just Miami's offering the most money, so that's where Justin Scott's going. No, I don't think that's what this is. I think that this is a situation where Miami is pushing hard for him and exhausting their efforts to make Justin feel like a priority, to your point, Brian. I just don't think Notre Dame has consistently done that in this recruitment. That's right. I don't know how else to quantify it, man. Notre Dame hasn't hustled hard enough in this one. That's my opinion on it. I just don't think they have. Can they still flip the script? Yes, I do think they can still flip the script, but it's got to start happening soon, or else it's not going to happen, in my opinion.
Right. Agree. And they are working to get there. They are. It's just going to take some time. That's the thing. So, yeah. And look, guys, here's the deal. I promise you, I'll make a promise to you guys. Okay. I promise you, when something changes, we'll talk to you about it. We'll let you know. I think we've pretty much said everything there is to say about where things stand with Justin Scott. When things change, I promise you we'll tell you about it. And Nathan, you're a board member, so you'll definitely get it for sure. You'll definitely get it.
Yep. Coleman Smith says, if you could take one player on offense and defense from the 2017 team and put it on this team, who would it be?
Oh, gosh. The offensive one's easy. That's super easy.
Yeah.
Could you imagine having a left side of your offensive line of Joe Alt and Quentin Nelson with Blake Fisher at right tackle and then Billy Schrouth at right guard with Zeke Carell at center? Hello, good. Joe Moore Award. I mean,
pretty good.
You know what I mean? Like, I'd take that in a heartbeat. That's an easy one for me, Ryan. I mean, and that's not a shot at Mike McGlinchey, but it's just like Notre Dame's already pretty good there.
Yeah, you have good tackles. Like, you're good. Yeah.
You actually have a better left tackle now than you did back then, in my opinion.
Oh, man. Yeah, I'm thinking about it now. It's like Joe Alt, Blake Fisher, Quentin Nelson, Billy Schrouth, and Zeke Carell. It's
yeah. It's not bad.
You'd also be pretty happy with that, as Zeke Carell having Quentin Nelson next to him.
Yeah, like, yes, Quentin Nelson and Billy Schrouth. Yeah, I think he'll take that. I think he'll take that. Yeah, call me crazy, but yeah, I think he would take that.
It's a pretty physical offensive line in that instance. Pretty physical,
no doubt. Yeah, that would be. Well, how about defense, Ryan? Who would your pick be on defense?
I'm trying to think. So that year, I'm just trying to. Man. Jeremiah Wusu-Koramoah, he wasn't that guy yet in 2017.
He was a freshman
right?
yet. He was not ready for that.
He wasn't that guy yet.
Yeah, Lohi Gilman was sitting out. He couldn't play that year. Some of the guys, Niles Morgan, Greer Martini, and Tavon Coney Tavon Coney at inside linebacker. You had Jerry Tillery at defensive tackle. Nick Coleman and Jalen Elliott were your safety. Sean Crawford was your nickel. You had Khalid Kareem was kind of an emerging type of player as a nice rotation piece. Honestly, I'd probably.
Is it weird that I want to say Jalen Elliott? Like, I don't know, man. Like,
I'd probably take, to be honest with you, I'd probably take Drew Tranquil. He was a rover on that team, but I'd move him inside. I mean, honestly, could you imagine if you're starting inside linebacker? Give me J.D. Bertrand and Drew Tranquil at inside linebacker. I'm feeling pretty good. The other option would be is Jerry Tillery. and I'd put him at nose. And I know
Are
that
you
in
playing at nose instead of 3
yeah,
tech?
because he was a nose on that team. He was a nose
Yeah.
on that. He didn't move to 3 technique till the next year.
Right.
I'd have put him at nose, but just so then I could have. But I honestly, I like Notre Dame's potential interior defensive line this year. I really do. I really believe, Ryan, that we're gonna look back on the end of, on this team at the end of the year and be like, wow, this group of Riley Mills and Howard Cross and Gabriel Rubio and Jason Onye, and then the younger guys coming up who are going to get their chances to shine during the season. Boy, that was a lot better than maybe we thought it was going to be going into the season. I have a lot of optimism about the interior. After the spring, after what we saw this spring, I have a lot of optimism about what this interior is going to be. So I have major question marks at will. So why would I not want a guy that was a 10-plus tackle for loss guy and a NFL starting linebacker now, potential to be my will? I'll take that. I'd take that in a heartbeat.
Someone said something in the chat that I thought was interesting because my immediate thought went to Jalen Elliott just because there's so much question marks at safety. But if I had Julian Love, I could move him to safety in this hypothetical,
or nickel,
right? Like or nickel, yeah, and I could strengthen that, and that would also strengthen safety by doing that as well. So maybe Julian Love would be my pick. That's an interesting one.
Yeah, there's some good options. I mean, you know, because you didn't really see the breakouts yet from like Khalid Kareem and Julian Aguara. They hadn't really broken out yet. You know, Khalid had like 3 sacks that year. Khalid and Julian had sort of their breakouts in 2018.
Yeah.
So those wouldn't really be good options. Although even 2017, Khalid Kareem would be a pretty good big end in this defense.
He'd be a really good big end.
He was, of all the defensive players they had in that stretch from like 17, 18, 19, I always thought Khalid was the most underrated and underappreciated. I thought he was so good at Notre Dame. I mean, 10-plus tackles for a loss and 2+. Could you imagine? Like, think about this. Let me just say this to you, Ryan, and you tell me what your reaction would be. If this upcoming season, Notre Dame starting defensive big end, the starting big end, has 10.5 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks, and 42 tackles, how good is this Notre Dame defense going to be?
Oh, it's very good. It's very good.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what Khalid did in 2018.
Because if a big end is getting that much backfield production in 2022 or 2023, excuse me, that tells me that Jordan Botelho and the Vipers are getting a lot of one-on-ones on the backside. Like, that's what that tells me. And I will take that all day. So yes, it would be very good. Very good.
Yeah, be very excited about that. And and not that he was underappreciated. I mean, fans liked him, but I don't think fans realized how good he was because he wasn't flashy. But he was also clutch. Like, every time I'm like, I feel like I could name all his sacks, and they're all like, okay, fourth quarter against Michigan when they're down a touchdown. You know what I mean? Like a Pitt game, fourth quarter, you just went up. They're trying to come back. He comes up with a sack. Like, it's just like he was a money player too. Like, he was a clutch player. And to me, this is what Tim and I were talking about, Ryan, and you and I have talked about before. That was the biggest difference to me between Isaiah Foskey in 2021 and Isaiah Foskey in 2022. The numbers were actually better at, tackles for loss and sacks this year, but he wasn't a money player this year. He was a money player last year. And that's how Khalid was for me.
It was nice to hear somebody else on the beat that also had a similar opinion of like Foskey's impact comparative to what it was in 2021. It was very interesting.
Yeah. Yep.
Next question from John A1 who says, is the Viper position a flex Sam in a 3-3-5 alignment to go from 3 down to 4 down without subbing? If that's why 3 linebacker recruits are playing the position. I mean, to a degree, I would say this, John, like, it's a flex Sam to a degree. So,
I mean, Sam's a strong side player, though. That's the biggest problem I have with the conversation. That's what the S stands for in a Sam. It's a strong side player, and the Viper is a weak side player.
Right. I get that. I think that the characteristics are probably a little bit of the same, John, to your question. Like, that's kind of where I go with it, because in a 3-3-5, basically when you're stacking the Sam backer or the Viper, however we're quantifying this player for a second, let's just, just linebacker or Viper. He's a guy that has to work from the second level, has to work from a little bit more depth, ability to still set an edge, to still flow, but also, depending if you're going from 3 down to 4 down, he can come and play up on the line of scrimmage. I feel like this is what the traditional Sam was. When we, because Brian, like, I always remember like a Sam linebacker, like it was like under and over fronts. Like, I'm going to get him on the line of scrimmage at times. I'm going to let him rush off the edge. And you used to think of a guy with a little bit more length, a guy that was a little bit better of a blitzer. So I do think that the characteristics are similar, John. Yes, I think that because Jordan Botelho, I think, is a perfect Viper, right? Because in a 3-3-5, he is playing that linebacker role and he is comfortable working on the second level. He's literally done that before. So yes, I think the characteristics are similar. To Brian's point, a Sam is a strong side linebacker, right? So they're on the front side. A Viper is a weak side defensive end or a boundary player. But in this regard, into your question, I do think there are a lot of similarities to skill sets. In a 3-3-5, with a guy at that linebacker spot that can also play Viper, that can come up on the line of scrimmage, that is how you would traditionally think of a Sam linebacker that was playing in a lot of underfronts. A guy that can play on ball, a guy that can play off ball, a guy that can do characteristics of both. So I do think there is some interchangeability there for sure.
Good question, John.
John
I
always
like this
has a million
name.
great questions.
Yeah,
man.
I like this, and they're thoughtful. That's the thing. And Nathan's got some, has had some. That's the things, the ones that got to make you think, and you got to really, okay, let me explain this one a little bit. We get a lot of those, and that's one thing I love about why we do. Honest, you guys want to know why we do mailbags almost every day, and we're not going to be able to keep doing them like 5 days a week like we are. We'll get to that next week when we explain our new thing. But part of it is because you guys ask so many great questions and they spark such great discussion. I mean, that's really ultimately the reason why we do it. It's not just because I like blowing 3.5 hours in the middle of the day where I can't get any other work done. No, it's because it's really great content, and you guys really do ask. And I'm like, how do they not run out of questions? Like, and it's like every day.
It's not usually a bunch of repeats either, which is always great. Like,
unless somebody's
really
trying to tweak us, like the guy Adam Blair asked, who's more athletic, Jalen Smith or Micah Parsons? Like, you're just trying to start crap, Adam. That's what you're trying to do. You're trying to start a fight.
Yes, he is.
So let's go with Homer since birth.
The mailbag and the podcast every day are really nice, though, because my wife doesn't like listening to me. So somebody has to, folks. And you guys just may be that outlet for me to talk during the day.
That's
so
right.
There we are.
You can always call me Ryan. You know that.
Oh, I appreciate that. From Domer since birth. It is a great name. Great screen name, by the way. Notre Dame posted a job position which replaces Bill Reese's vacancy. Did you see it? What other qualifications would you look for when filling the void? Background, years experience, connections. Happy Memorial Day weekend to you as well.
I saw that it was listed. I didn't necessarily read what was in the qualification, so I don't really know.
Was that what someone posted that on the board, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or something like that?
I believe it was for that position. Yeah. I mean, look, the way that the position has been used in the past, you need someone that can evaluate film well, and because here's the way it works, Ryan. Notre Dame probably gets thousands of kids reaching out every year, thousands. And you need some way to weed out and process it to where you're really getting the guys that Notre Dame should go after in front of the coaches.
Yep.
And
especially
so that's
with the transfer portal now.
Yeah,
like, it's just wild.
Yeah. That's part of and honestly, they need to and I don't know if they're doing this yet, but if they're not, they need to. They need to have a high school staff and the NFL does this. You have scouts, I believe, Ryan. Teams have scouts that literally just evaluate other teams.
Oh yeah,
the free agents that are going to be coming up that next year.
There's a college scouting department and there's a pro scouting department. The pro scouts are scouting the team and then upcoming free agents and other teams as well.
And who guys you may want to trade for. Hey, we need a defensive end who, we're willing to trade for it. Who should we look at? Well, and Notre Dame needs that if they don't already. When I say that they need it, they may already have it. I haven't asked this question. I'm just saying if they don't, they need it. If they do have it, great. It needs to be expanded. But whether you're doing it high school or for other teams, you need someone that can evaluate film properly. Now, what does that mean? Okay, I can evaluate a kid's talent. I'm good at projecting what this kid can be, not just overall as a player, but also fit into what we do. You'll get people I have a buddy who's pretty good evaluator of film, but he'll say, hey, do you think Notre Dame should recruit this kid? And all of his evaluations of the kid, Ryan, are spot on. Hey, you nailed this kid. He's like, well, why won't you pass him along to the Notre Dame staff? And I was like, because that kid, where would he play in the Notre Dame defense or the Notre Dame offense? Like, he would fit in much better here. And so there's got to be that aspect of it too. someone that can also look at a kid like, hey, I see that kid, and I have the ability to look and say, I think that kid can get here, can fill out here, or you know what, this kid can't really fill out here. So I would want someone that has some experience doing that. I don't know how much, because Ryan, I always say to this, yeah, experience is very valuable, but it can't be something you put so much stock into that you miss out on a chance to bring in someone that lacks it, that has really talent, a great talent in that regard. Like Bill Reese is a good evaluator, very good evaluator of talent. He didn't like suck at it for 15 years and eventually he got good at it. I'd be willing to bet he's always had a good eye for talent. Now it gets better and better and better over the years. And I mean, but he was Terry Donahue's primary recruiting guy, like back in like the 80s. You know what I mean? Like, so he's been doing this a long time. And so experience matters. But like I said, if you've got the talent to do it, you can show it early on. You don't necessarily bring in a rookie for this job, but you also don't need someone who's 60 either. Just find someone that's really good at it. But to me, it just I don't care about connections for this job. I care about a bit evaluate film, and I don't know what role this person is allowed to have in regard to engaging with recruits on campus. I don't know how that goes. So if it is a job where there's going to be some of that, you need someone, some personality, to engage with kids and things like that. And you got to try your best to find someone who's honest and loyal. That's the other part too, is integrity matters a lot as well. Then
fit with the program on both sides of things, right? Like you fit into the job with the program, but you also need to find who fits with the program. So fit just matters so much in this conversation.
Exactly. Thoughts on this one? Because I know this is kind of your wheelhouse. What are your thoughts on this?
I think that there's a bigger need in the scouting side of college ball right now. And I think that this is relevant to a degree of it is expanded way past the traditional scouting of high school recruits and your occasional transfer portal kid or transfer kid, I should say in general. The transfer portal has escalated things a lot more to this point, right? So there's just a higher volume of players that you're going to watch on a year-to-year basis. It's why this position is important. It's why Chad Bowden needs more help behind him, right? It's why this is so important because there's just a higher volume of kids. I mean, there's thousands of kids just in the transfer portal. Like, forget about the high school recruiting side for a second. It's insane, man. So I think that it's obviously a need. I think for me, I mean, especially with Notre Dame, the way, with how we're seeing them recruit right now, as far as like trying to find some players that maybe some people are a little bit lower on as far as like the rankings perspective and just kind of the general stuff, is that you need to have a guy that has a good eye at the end of the day. So I think, yes, for me, it's about a guy that can see talent and can project talents. And it always will be about those things. Now, obviously, they need to fit into the Notre Dame aura, right? Like, can't just be a bad fit into it foundationally yourself. But I really do think that it is always going to be about, can you project a guy to being a difference maker on the next level? Not only just a difference maker, but how you project them into the program as well. Because there's different layers to this, right? Not every recruit that you're going to go after is a guy that you're like, that guy's foundational. He's going to be an All-American. He's going to do this. There's a lot of depth players that you're just like, that kid's going to be a really good depth player. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's different layers to building a roster. I think you have to understand that in this type of situation.
Yeah, good stuff. Very good stuff.
We had another question from Coleman Smith who said, over under Tobias Merriweather, 50 receptions, 800 yards. Did we answer this one like a couple weeks ago? Like
week?
It was like the same exact question. I could be wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's close to what I'm hoping the numbers look like this year. I mean, I could see a scenario where maybe he's around 800 and slightly under 50. Or, depending on how he's used, if he's used as more of a vertical threat, I could see him also being around 800 and being over 60 if he's more of a possession guy, working crossers, middles, ends, comebacks, outs, things like that. It just depends on how he's used. I think that's close to where he is. I think we went something like last time, like slightly under on catches and around and slightly over maybe, or a wash on yards or something like that.
I think the last person actually asked, and it might have been Coleman that maybe just changed it up a little bit, but someone said, I think 50 receptions and 900. I think last time
Okay.
I would say I'm slightly under on the catches and I'm slightly over on the 800 yards. I think it's going to be like 47 catches for 800 something yards. Like that's just kind of where I see it. I think he's going to average like 18 yards a catch this year. And I just think that because not that he can't handle a higher volume, in my opinion, I think he can. But I think that there's going to be other receivers on this roster: Jaden Thomas, Jaden Greathouse, Deion Colsey, Chris Tyree, the running backs. Like I just tight ends, obviously. I just think that the ball's going to be spread out a little bit this year. Like I really think. I think if Tobias takes that type of jump, though, say he has 47 catches for 820 yards, then as a junior, he's a 1,000-yard kid with like 70 plus catches or like 60 plus catches. Like I think this year that we're going to see them really. I think they're really going to spread the ball out a little bit this year. Someone say he's going to have 22 yards a catch. Woo, man.
Yeah, I'll take it.
I would take it too. I would take it too. John A1 says, how does Logan Thomas compare to Julian Aquara as a prospect?
There are some things that are very similar. So I actually, when I was doing my comp for him, Ryan, I actually considered Julian for a second. The reason I went away from it is because I think Logan has a much better frame than Julian did. Julian was always a little bit narrow shoulders, a little bit narrow hips. He was never going to be a guy that could get up to 260 and keep his athleticism. Now, Julian had really good strength like Logan has. I think Logan is built more like Romeo was at that age. Not quite as big, but broad shoulders, really long arms, a little thicker, potential around the core and thighs. I don't think he's going to be as big as Romeo is. I mean, Romeo's moved inside at times in the NFL. I don't see Logan doing that. He's like
260 something now, right?
Yeah, I just think Logan will be closer to what Romeo was as a body type in college than what Julian was, and Julian struggled to get to 240 and keep it. I think Logan Thomas will be that by the end of his freshman year. I just think he has a better frame. There's some similarities Julian was really twitchy. He had a really explosive first step. I think Logan has a very good first step. I don't know if it's quite like this one is. The guy that I ended up comping him to, Ryan, is Josh Allen, the kid that played at Kentucky. Now, style-wise, I think frame-wise, very similar. Josh Allen was a guy that gained weight. I think he's what was he, about 240, 250 when he was in his last year at
I think he got up to like 260 his last year. Okay. He was a little bit bigger that year.
But he was a 6'4", 220-pound kid coming out of high school. Real strong, real long, string bean kind of kid, had some real natural power. I think Josh Allen had a really nice first step, but I don't think he was like, wow, look at that step. He wasn't like Elvis Doomerville or something with his first step, right? And he was a guy that could play off the ball, could move around, could play the run. I think that's a guy who body type wise and skill set wise is very similar to me. Reminds me a lot of him. Now, of course, I'm more referring in this instance to Josh Allen as what he was at Kentucky. Logan is a much more advanced prospect than Josh Allen was coming out of high school, and certainly ranked higher than Josh was coming out of high school. But I think that's the comp that I think, because Julian could play the run. But they dropped. I mean, he had an interception against Michigan, but he wasn't very good at dropping into coverage.
It was a nice interception against Michigan.
It was,
too. It was nice.
But he got where he needed to get to, and he caught the ball. But he wasn't a guy that was like dropping into coverage a lot. And Julian was good at one thing, and that was rushing the quarterback. And he had a very inconsistent motor. Josh Allen had a really good motor, and I think Logan has a better motor too. And you when you watch his game film, you'll see it. He's got a lot more consistent motor than what I think Julian had coming out of high school. I think he also plays a better pad low. I think at times Julian would get high coming out of his stance. He would just lift up, but he was just so explosive he could get away with it in college.
Yeah, I just did a little deep dive into Logan, which that should be out, probably over the next few days. But
tomorrow, I was going to put up tomorrow morning, Ryan. The film room you did, it's tomorrow morning.
Yeah. I mean, Logan is a really intriguing football player, Brian, because he is, and his coach even said this. He's pretty raw, man. Like, he doesn't really know what he's doing with his hands or anything yet. He just is long, twitched up, and flexible. Like those things, that works, man. That goes at the edge spot. Like, if you have a guy that can win with the first step, is also flexible, and has some underlying power to him, I think he's got tremendous upside, Logan. And Logan plays hard to your degree. I mean, he makes a lot of plays in pursuits, working down the football field, a lot of really nice physical ability, but also I think there's a lot of motor to him as well. So if he's developed properly, if he gains the appropriate weight, which should not be an issue, if he is developed as far as understanding how to rush the pass or how to use his hands better, I think he's got massive upside. I really do. And he's a kid that drops into coverage a ton at his high school. Yep. So I think that is a perfect fit into the Viper spot. Just about development, man. Get good weight on that frame and teach him how to use his hands. If you do those things, I think he's going to be really good. His first step is nice, man. It's inconsistent because they use him a lot off ball at times. They also use him as like a 3-4 alignment where he's off the line of scrimmage a little bit as well. So I think when you get him as more of an attack style player, his first step is going to be showcased even more because it's good when he fires off the football.
Yeah. Yeah, he's got a lot of tools, Ryan. But he's one of the, for me, and I'm curious to get your response to this, see if it was the same way for you. For me, he is definitely a guy that grew on me. He was not a guy like the first time I watched Malachi Williams, I was like, yep, sign me up. I mean, it was just, it jumped out at me. Justin Scott was not a guy that the first time I watched his film, I was blown away. Second, third time, I was like, okay, yeah, you're starting to see it, right? Because there's just because he needs a lot of, this was back when I was watching Justin's, I think, sophomore film. It's just like, okay, you needed it because he didn't know what he was doing. Technically, he wasn't really advanced, and so he didn't know how to maximize his tools per se. And Logan was very similar. And his sophomore film is very intriguing because he plays mostly as a 3-point stance, just end as a sophomore. And he was much more productive as a sophomore than he was as a junior for a bunch of different reasons. But it took me some time for his film to grow on me, to be honest with you. But as you dive into it, you're like, okay, yeah, I really see the tools. And when I say that, that's not that I have to convince myself he's good. It's just sometimes film can be such that, or a prospect can be such that the lack of technical skill can sometimes mask. Like Bodie Cahoon's one of those guys. You watch a lot of film, you're like, yeah, it's solid, it's good, it's good. And then there's like 7 or 8 plays, you're like, whoa, okay, that was, oh, let me see that again. That was different. Yeah. And then you start to watch the film differently because you're like, okay, I know he can do this. Why doesn't he do it more often? Okay, his technique is here, his technique there's an issue. He's
he's only played linebacker half a season,
right? And then you talk to the high school coach like you did, and he says the guy played safety for us his whole career. He never played linebacker, and we didn't move him to linebacker till the season had already started. And he said, okay, that makes a little sense. That would make sense why technically he gets himself in some situations. You're like, yeah, I wish he, play a better technique. And that's all part of the recruiting process. Not every kid's going to blow you away immediately. Like first time I watched Aaron Lynch, I was like, holy moly. I needed to watch Stephon Tuitt a couple times because he was just such a bully. And I mean that in a good way that he just would, it's like, this kid's just bigger and stronger at best, but is he really got the athletic skill? So you had to like really study Stephon, and then you're like, yeah, this kid's legit. Where Aaron, just the first time you watch this film, you're like, yep, okay, I'll take that. Sure. They were both excellent prospects. It just takes a little bit of work. And Logan was a guy that took a little bit of work for me. Khalid Kareem was that way for me. Julian Aguirre's film popped first time you saw it. You could just see that burst off the edge. Like, oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. But Khalid Kareem was like, let me keep watching. Then you see like, this kid's not flashy. He's not sexy. This kid's just a really good football player. And Logan to me is one of those guys that it took some time, but once I finally was like, yeah, okay, I see it. And you put it all together, you realize this kid's got a lot of talent, a lot of potential.
There's slow burn players for me every single year, man. Like even in the NFL draft space, Brian, like I was not a big Jahan Dotson fan, but then I just watched more and more of him, like at multiple games. I'm like, okay, I see it now. Like I get it. I get why some people are so high on him. It makes total sense. And I think that always happens, especially again, a kid that was asked to do so many different things is also a person that's maybe not being maximized in one area as much. I mean, like that's for me. Like, I think that some people might watch Brandon Hillman last year, or Oliver Miles this year, or someone like that, or Isaiah Canyon to a degree, and they'll look at him and be like, I don't really know what this kid is because he's asked to do so much things. But then you're like, but like, let's isolate these traits and let's project him a little bit more, because if we project this perfectly or properly, I should say, then they can be really good. So I just think that that's the sword of playing high school football sometimes, Brian. Like I played linebacker, defensive end, and offensive tackle in high school. It's like, why? Why was I doing that? Because I had to. Like, it's a necessity that your high school team needed you to do that type of stuff, right? So I think projecting sometimes at high school is really difficult because it's like Bodie Cahoon playing single high free safety as a sophomore. You're like, that's cool and all, but like, it's not what he's going to do at the next level. You know what I mean? Like that's just not incredibly translatable. So being able to see that, I really think that just understanding how to isolate traits is the biggest thing.
Yeah. That's a good one.
We had a next question, another one from John A1. John said, does the current coaching staff need to make an adjustment in its recruiting commitment, decommitment philosophy, or program?
I think they already have, and I'm good with what they're doing now. If the kid still wants to take visits and explore the process, don't commit. I mean, they literally have told kids, yeah, he silent commits, but yeah, you're not going public with this, and we're not really counting it. I mean, that's the thing with like Peyton Pierce. He committed to Notre Dame, but he wanted to take more visits. And so Notre Dame said, well, don't commit publicly right now. And they didn't treat him like a committed kid. And of course, everything that happened kind of went down that road. So, I mean, I'm good with where they are. I'm good with that. I'm good with the whole, if you're committed to us, you can't take official visits. And we talked about this the other day. I also like the fact that Notre Dame is consistent with it, where they're not going to say, well, yes, hey, we don't allow our commits to visit officially other places, and so we're not going to let anybody else's official commits visit here officially. And so now again, we're talking official visits. Notre Dame's policy on official visits and unofficial visits is different. Yeah. But if you are committed to even taking unofficial visits, for example, if Notre Dame commit right now said, hey, I want to go visit Ohio State unofficially. So, okay, now Notre Dame's going to respond with, okay, this kid's not fully committed to us. We need to make sure we're doing our due diligence to be prepared in case he decides not to sign up with us. But the other part of it, Ryan, is that you're going to say, but we're not going to say, hey, you're out of the class. Or you have to decommit because it's an unofficial visit. It's the official visit is when they say that, because that's a whole different level to this conversation. And so I'm comfortable with where they are, and I think they've adjusted from last year, where they're less willing to take a commitment from a kid. Like Peyton Bowen, I believe, always said he was going to take visits.
Yeah,
and they still took his commitment. I think if this was happening again this year, they wouldn't. I don't think they would take his commitment this year. And that probably would be smart. So I think they have adjusted and adapted to the reality of how things have gone. And I think where they are now is where I think they need to be. They have to be willing to take a hard line on this, Ryan, because otherwise you're going to just find kids just kind of playing Notre Dame and holding spots and things like that. I'm not going to get happen with. I mean, we always talk about like last year with Scott and with Bowen and Keon and those kind of guys, but it happened the year before, like a Maureen Walker. He kept taking visits, and I was just like, guys, he's not coming to Notre Dame. I mean, it's very clear that Notre Dame is just a holdover until he finds a school he wants to go to. And you get to that point in time, and now all of a sudden you're getting signing day and you're burned. Yes. And they didn't play that right. So I think just over time they've kind of said, hey, look, this is how we got to be. And if you're really committed to us and you really want to be here, then you're not going to go anywhere. And that's yeah.
I just think they have to do a better job of reading the actions and not the words too much. Like I just think there was a couple kids last year that said all the right things, would never back down from it, but then you knew, well, you didn't know, but that it ended up obviously biting at the end of the day, right? So I do think that changing it a little bit is a good idea on their part, Brian. I think we definitely agree on there. I mean, this is a situation where do your due diligence, make sure a kid's comfortable. That's a yes, by the way. Sorry, I didn't want to text you back, but yes, that is a yes. But I think that this is a situation where, for me, you have to make sure that a kid and you are on the same page, right? I'm making a full commitment to you. I want to make sure you're fully committing to me and vice versa. So, yes, I think that we are in a situation right now where Notre Dame needs to have that true conversation. Like, hey, man, it's fine if you want to take visits. It's fine. But don't commit to us right now. Like, we're still going to be here. But but the other thing, though, is that it's a fine line because some kids you're always going to hold a spot open for them, right? But then there's other kids where it's like you can choose to do that, but there's no guarantee that your spot is still going to be open when you make a decision ultimately. And we have seen that happen as well. So I just think it's a fine line, man. It's tough.
This is the question that I texted Ryan because I didn't want to bring this question up if he hadn't watched this young man's film, because they're offering 25 kids so fast it's hard to dive into all their films. So Trip Bergen asked, Ryan, what do you think about the 2025 running back Justin Thurman? Started at DeSmet Jesuit last year, now at Tampa Jesuit. Ryan, they offered him yesterday, correct?
They
Was it
did.
yesterday, the day before? So
He was one of them.
Ryan, have you had a chance you have had a chance? I mean, we were texting back and forth about that. So
Yes,
you've had a chance to watch him. What are your thoughts on him as an early offer?
well, he's a really interesting player. Didn't play a ton for Tampa Jesuit last year because they actually had a senior that was really good, but he did play very fast. This kid is lightning in a bottle. He's about 6 foot, 180 pounds. I'm going to have a little bit more of a film breakdown, a little bit of a deeper dive on the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com later today. I was working through because there was a ton of offers yesterday. So getting through a couple of these kids. Justin Thurman was a kid that he doesn't have the longest highlight tape of all time because, again, I think he only had like 19 carries last year for Tampa Jesuit, but he is explosive. He's got a good size profile. I think he's going to play at 6 foot, 200 pounds. He can really stop and start at a really elite level, in my opinion. So that kid's talented. He's very talented. I'm excited to see him at Tampa Jesuit this year because he should have a bigger role with the graduation of their top back last year. So I think that he's really going to burst on the scene. I mean, he's been offered by a lot of blue bloods already. He's going to be on the road the next 6 weeks. He's going to be at Notre Dame on June 15th, actually, on an unofficial visit. So he's going to be all over the place, and he's a really talented football player. I liked Thurman a lot, man. He can go. He's a reported like 4.38 in the 40, Brian. Like he's lightning, man. He can run.
I like that. I always take that. 4.3, sign me up.
Dude, it's 4.3 and like a high, like 37-inch vert reported and like 9.11 broad as a sophomore in high school. Like, all right, man. All right.
That'll play.
Yes, that'll play. John's question, John A1. Which Viper rotation was the best, 2018, 2020, or 2021?
This is an easy one, 2018. I mean, that's an easy. The best year that Julian Aguara had to me was that year. And Dalen Hayes was a pretty darn good Viper that year as well as the rotation guy. I mean, they basically had two starters at that position. 2020 was Dalen Hayes and Isaiah Foskey, but Foskey didn't play a ton that year. I mean,
that was like the 4.5 sack year, right?
Yeah. And but then 21 was basically just Foskey, essentially.
Yeah.
I mean, you didn't really have a second Viper that was really bringing a lot
Adam
to
Malola
the
played
table.
a little bit. Like,
But Justin played all over. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, he'd play field end and 2018 is an easy one for me. None of them are bad, but that's an easy one for me. It's 2018.
I think 2018 is the only one that you have in the conversation in the rotations you just named, Brian. That's the only one that has two kids that are playing in the NFL right now. So it's a pretty good indication, right? I mean, Dalen Hayes is playing in the NFL, Julian Aguara is playing in the NFL, so that's pretty good. I'm interested to see if we look back on the 2021 in a couple years, depending on how Jordan Patelho, progresses here as far as like what the in a vacuum talent was. But I agree. I mean, from the on-field production perspective and the fact that both those kids are playing in the NFL, 2018 is a pretty easy one too. I agree.
Yep. All right, another good one here. A lot of good questions today, guys. Really good questions.
What are we doing here? Give me a flipping break. Which player currently committed to another school?
For those listening via podcast, that's actually the name of the person who asked the question. Because if you're listening and you're not watching, and the people listen on podcasts, they're just going to be like, "Why did Ryan just randomly flip out?" What are we doing here?
I should have phrased it.
Break.
This question is from, what are we doing? Are they doing here? Give me a flipping break. Who says which player currently committed to another school do you think Notre Dame has the best chance of flipping? We've talked about this one a ton. I mean, right now it's Caleb Beasley. Yeah. That's the one. He is obviously out of the state of Tennessee, committed to the University of Tennessee, but there is obvious interest between him and Notre Dame. Mm-hmm. Obvious. Notre Dame is very high on him. I think Caleb Beasley is also high on Notre Dame. It's just the momentum of Tennessee being really good last year, the in-state school, that was the pull for Caleb Beasley, but they're staying on him. And I think that he's the clearest guy that I look for. And I say, if there's one guy that's going to flip in the class, I think eventually it could be Caleb Beasley to Notre Dame.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. I can definitely see that one. And right now, there's really not any other committed guys they're really on hard. right now.
No.
So it makes it even easier.
Yes. Yes. And this one is from Domer TX22. Have you seen enough to make an early judgment on Jared Parker as a recruiter? Is it me, or do hardly any recruits mention Al Golden in recruiting interviews?
Well, I'll go reverse on this one, Ryan. We started to hear for a little while more kids talking about him, and then it
Yeah.
fades a little bit. And
Yes.
and so it just depends on the kid. We don't hear his name enough because he doesn't do enough. He's doing better than he did last year, but he still doesn't do enough. Kingston has talked about, or Elijah Rushing that has talked to you about how, Golden's had an impact in his recruitment.
Yeah.
He's talked to him, and
Sean Civiliano also said that Al Golden's
yeah.
been pretty impactful in his
So
recruitment.
there's
So, yeah.
some,
Yeah.
just not enough.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think
Agreed.
Kingston he's made a positive impression on Kingston. I wouldn't say he's done a
Yeah.
lot with Kingston, but he's made a positive impression with Kingston. Here's the thing about Al Golden, folks. Al Golden's a really good recruiter when he wants to be. I mean, he was in my opinion, a really strong recruiter at Virginia. I think he was a very strong recruiter at Temple. I just think his thing is he just doesn't do it. He just makes the choice not to do it as much as he needs to and as dynamic as he can. That's the big thing. That's what it boils down to for me. And that's what kind of, be honest with you, ticks me off because it's like, okay, if you you're not going to be here for 4 or 5 years, fine. But while you're here, bust your butt and make sure you leave this place way better than you found it. That should always be your goal when you're a coach because everybody knows coaches are never Ryan, the days of coaches being assistant coaches at a place for 20, 30 years, that's a thing in the past. It is. It just doesn't really happen. I mean, Mike Elson was here a little over a decade, and it felt like he was a lifer, and then up and goes to Michigan, right? I mean, it happens. It's part of the deal. But your mentality should be, while I'm here, I'm going to make sure that I can leave this place in the best position I can. And that means busting my hump on the recruiting trail, busting my hump as a coach, and working to develop these young men. And I don't know that I don't believe personally that Al Golden is giving it his best on the recruiting trail. He's picking and choosing when he is. And that's the frustrating thing because I think he could be a very dynamic recruiter.
Yep. To the first part of this question, though, I do think that Jared Parker's giving it his best as far as recruiting side of things. I mean, it was funny. I was just on the Lucky Lefty show, Brian, and they were asking me about Carter Nelson visiting officially next week. And I was talking about, remember we were talking about how it takes like 4 hours from Sioux Falls to get to Ainsworth, Nebraska, and then 4 hours back just to get to the airport. I'm like, Jared Parker's putting in some work, guys. Like he puts in work. So I have a high opinion of Jared Parker as a recruiter. There's no doubt. Like I think that he's done a good job connecting, and especially at the tight end position. I really just Al Golden. Guys, I mean, I'm in a situation here where I hope for the best, but I'm going to report the truth. Like that's just kind of where I am with it, right? I mean, there's guys that I hear Al Golden's name get caught up, but there's very few, even linebackers in this class, that Al Golden's the first name that gets popped up. It's very few. It's very few. I mean, that's just the reality of it. And if for me, that's like the biggest indicator. It's like if I'm talking to Chris Cole or Kingston Viliamoasa or somebody else, the first name that's out of their mouth should be Al Golden because that's not only their defensive coordinator, it's also the linebacker coach. Like he's the linebacker coach for your team. So if you don't hear his name associated that early on in a conversation with the kid, it's not great. It's just not great. So that's it, man. That's where we are with it.
Everything I've heard about Jared Parker's recruiter is very, very good. Very good. And I think that's going to end up being a net positive. It's just, again, we're in a situation where he kind of inherited a guy in his first class. They got Jack Larson really early. I think a lot of fans aren't as high on Jack Larson as I think they should be. And so he's not getting as much credit for that one. We'll see. I'd like to see him close on just as a position coach. I'd like to see him close on a Carter Nelson. But next year's the year where I'm going to really say that's the year I'm evaluating and judging Jared Parker on his abilities to type. Get me James Flanagan and Nate Roberts type of 2-man class. And, or if you get Carter Nelson this year, then get me one of those 2 studs next year. And now I'm saying you're continuing this elite recruiting tradition at tight end. That's what I'll say.
If Notre Dame gets Carter Nelson and Jack Larson in 2024, I don't want to hear a word about recruiting for Jared Parker. I'm like,
Yeah.
yup, that's
Yeah.
pretty dang good, man. That's pretty
But I want
good.
to, I want to see him stack, right? That's the thing,
Yes.
Ryan. We're talking about stack. So, okay, now you don't need to get me 2 in 25. Get me James Flanagan or Nate Roberts or something. And there's some other guys that I haven't watched yet. Like I haven't watched CJ Nixon. For all I know, he's every bit as good as
He's
those
like a
guys.
basketball player.
Yeah.
And yeah.
My point is like it's that high level type of guy. Whether it's those two guys specifically or someone else like them, those are going to be very, very important, to that aspect of it. All right.
John A. said, can Micah Bell make a freshman impact?
Yes, he
Probably
can.
on special teams,
Yeah.
more than defense, most likely. But yeah,
as a corner, Ryan. Here's the thing on Micah Bell. I'll make it as simple as I can. It's going to all depend on how quickly he can figure out the technical part of the game, because he can fly, and he's a pretty tough kid for his size. Yeah. But he's short. I mean, he's what, 5'10", probably,
maybe.
Ryan.
Maybe 5'10". Yeah.
So, and he's raw, very raw. So he's going to have to learn how to play the game. The thing about Benjamin Morrison is he kind of knew how to play, right? Christian Gray knew how to play. So that's why you expect him to play as a freshman. Cam Hart needed a couple years to figure out how to play corner, because in high school he just was athletic. I mean, he just got by on athleticism as a corner in high school. So he needed time to learn how to play. Mike is going to need time to learn how to play. But when you're that fast, you don't have to be the world's greatest technician to be able to find a role. I think special teams, perhaps as a freshman, could he play as a corner as a rookie? Absolutely. It's going to be harder because it's such a deep position group and he is raw, but I'm not going to be shocked by anything a kid that runs a 4.3 does at this point in time. It's just, I don't expect it. And so if he doesn't make a freshman impact, I'm not going to be mad about it. Like, oh, gee, maybe he's not as good as I thought. He was always going to need work. Always going to need to work. Chris Gray was always the guy that you tagged as the guy that could potentially help out as a freshman. Agree?
Yeah. I mean, he's technically refined. That was the big thing about Christian Gray. I think Micah, I think there's a path, especially on special teams for me, John, where I looked at it and I say, yeah, I want the 4.3 kid running down on punt and on kickoff if he can physically hold up and potentially help you in the return game as well. You give him a chance to, like, hey, if he can handle it, like, let's see if he can return some kicks, do that type of thing. So I think special teams for me, because that's one spot where there's been some points over the last couple of years, Brian, where I'm just like watching and I'm just like, man, they just look more athletic on special teams than Notre Dame looks athletic on special teams as far as like the coverage units is concerned, right? I mean, I still have flashbacks to what was that year with Ohio State's Will Fuller? Was that 2015?
15.
Was it 2015? Where it was just like they were just moving at a different speed on special teams what Notre Dame was moving on. Like it wasn't even close. That happened last year a lot, man, where I'm just like, they just look faster on special teams than Notre Dame. So where should there be a biggest plus? I mean, we talk about
the return Notre Dame's kick return team,
like them covering on Notre Dame's kick return team last year. Like I felt like they were just
come on Ohio State
last year. I mean, I think there was a couple teams last year that kind of popped to me.
I just wasn't sure what you're, because I'm thinking
Ohio State's one of them.
Talking about special teams, I'm like, hold on a second now. Notre Dame has
no.
You're talking about the kick return team,
like pump block or anything. Yeah, I'm talking about the coverage units. Yeah,
got it.
Yeah,
agree.
So I think that people always talk about like where are all these great linebacker recruits and corner recruits and wide receiver recruits, like where are they going to make their biggest impact on offense or defense? And I'm always like, hey guys, like they're going to play special teams too, and that's going to be a big increase as far as length. Athleticism is also going to be on the special team side of the game. So I really think that he's one of the guys where I look at it and say that could be a guy that could contribute on special teams. Like Preston Zinter could be a guy that contributes. Drake Bowen. Like there's a bunch of guys where I'm like, that guy could be a special teams help and could make your team a lot more athletic and a lot longer. Yeah. David Carpenter with the super chat. Thank you so much, David.
Thank you, David.
Happy Friday, Brian and Ryan. Thank you. Based on what you have seen so far from the new offensive line coach, what strategy would you guess he is pursuing? I'm confused from what I was used to, but I'm no offensive line expert. What say you?
I would say the same. I'm a little confused. I'm not sure what they're doing, to be honest with you. And now I'm not gonna crush them for it yet, Ryan, because I'm kind of in let's let it play out mode. But right now, I have not been in love with what I've seen from Coach Rudolph. I don't quite understand some of the decisions they've made. I don't understand the decision not to recruit Caleb Brewer anymore. I don't know what they're doing at tackle. To be honest with you, I don't know. Meaning, I don't know what they're doing. I don't know. It's hard to figure out. Like, are do they love Styles? Do they love Grant Bricks? Are they, where is he pushing for Gearby? I really don't have a clue. Part of that's not Notre Dame's fault. Part of that's because, like, Gearby Lambert doesn't really talk to us or hardly anybody, and his high school coaches are very unhelpful and uncooperative when it comes to trying to help get a read on things, which is fine. Whatever, it is what it is. So, and it's such a bad O-line class generally, nationally, Ryan, that it's just kind of like, this isn't the class I'm making a strong opinion on Joe Rudolph about. I'm just not. I mean, he inherited one kid. He got a kid that he really wanted it. Okay. I don't know that I could say I know what I feel about Anthony Knapp, and I'm not that high on him. But I also don't feel like I can judge Joe Rudolph because I don't know him well enough to say, like, if Harry Hiestand were to take a guy like Anthony Knapp, I probably would give him the benefit of the doubt. Even I would say what I feel about him, but then I'd give him the benefit of the doubt because it's Harry Hiestand. I don't know Joe Rudolph well enough to do that or not do that. Right? I can't say that I know him well enough to say, nope, don't trust him. That's what I'm saying. I want to see him let it play out a little bit. I want to see him let him coach the season. I want to see kind of the moves they make over the next 6 to 8 months on 25 offensive linemen, which so far seems like a much better O-line class. Yes. So I'm trying to be a little bit more, let's see it play out and let's give them a year. It's what a lot of people asked us to do with Al Washington last year. So I'm trying to so I can say I'm concerned right now, but I'm not going to crush them like we did Al Washington last year because, look, I think it's fair. First year of a guy, let's see what he does in year one. Have your evaluation and see what he does to build on it. So I'm hearing that from some of you, and so we'll do that. And so I'll tell you I'm concerned about it. I don't agree with some of the moves being made. But I also will admit that it's early and his first year of class, it's just not a good year nationally. I think there's a lot of factors that might make you say, hey, look, let's just let it play out. Let's maybe let's see what he does in 2025 class as well. And, because if he goes out and gets like Owen Strebig and, David Sanders, I mean, there's some dude, we've seen some dudes in the 25 class in the offensive line.
Avery Gotch.
I mean, there's some dudes like, okay, now I feel better. Maybe he just didn't love some of these kids, and they've got so many kids on the current roster that they were fine just taking 3 and, and then just moving on to next. Maybe that's true. So I'm going to at least let it play out a little bit. And, but if you're going to do that, I need to start seeing you get early involved with 25 kids. And they, I mean, look, when their last open period, he saw almost exclusively 25 kids. He went out and saw a couple 26 kids. So I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt and let it play out a little bit and see. But yeah, so far I'm a little confused, but I guess I'm just not as upset about it as maybe I would be last year or was without Washington, partly because there were guys to be had that were dudes last year.
Yes.
I don't know that there's a lot of dudes on the board on the offensive line nationally, period, that you could go after like there were, in my opinion, on the defensive line last year. So that also factors a little bit into it as well.
And the other weird part, Brian, is that Joe Rudolph never had, he had a good recruiting background as well coming into Notre Dame, right? Like, I mean, he has a pretty good resume when you talk about like landing some top recruits historically. So yeah, I'm not jumping off the bridge because yes, he took a player in this year's class that I'm not incredibly high on, but you know who else did that? I wasn't a big Christopher Terra guy in last year's class. Like, I wasn't a big Christopher Terra guy. Let's see what the rest of the class looks like though, because 2023 still ended up being a really good group in my opinion. Because you still landed 4 other good guys,
and that's the thing. You're always going to have guys like that, but you got Charles Jagasaw, who we loved. Yes. You got Joe Otting, who we loved. You got Sam Pendleton, who I think both grew to love. You got Sullivan Absher, who we both think has a lot of upside. The only question with Sullivan Absher is where is he going to play?
Exactly.
I mean, I think Ryan and I both like him more at guard than we do tackle. Notre Dame likes him a little bit more at tackle. We'll see how it plays out, but guy's talented. And so if they had in this class, like if Caleb Brewer was committed and Gearby Lambert was committed and they took Anthony Knapp, I'd have a completely different opinion of
I
it
have
than
no problem. Yep,
right.
no problem.
But now
Yep.
you passed on a dude that I'm very high on to take him. You better get that right.
Yeah.
You better
well,
get
yeah,
that
I mean,
right.
you have to get now Gerby Lambert and Grant Bricks or Styles Prescott.
Right.
Or yeah,
Right.
exactly. Yeah. Like you have to figure that out. So
right. And I like Styles Prescott, but he's not a guy that makes everything all good now.
Exactly.
Like he's not like that. Gearby is.
Yes.
But Styles is not. He's a good, solid prospect with some tools, but he needs work.
Yep.
He needs work, which I'm okay with on the offensive line, right? Like I don't mind taking pride. Notre Dame is not going to need a tackle from this class that's played next year. You know what I mean? In 2024.
And I think most offensive line recruits are aware of that too, that like it's a longer road. I mean, I was talking to Charles Jagasaw the other day, and Charles is just like, yeah, I mean, if I play type of thing. Like he doesn't have the high expectations as far as like starting as a freshman. And it's like that kid was a 5-star recruit. Like you probably should have expectations, but just where you are. Wade Garrett, we had a super chat. Wade, thank you so much. He said, have a great weekend. Holiday weekend, everyone. You as well. Eat some great food. We'll try. Have some drinks or Mountain Dew for Coach D. And God bless you and your growing family, Ryan. Thank you so much, Wade. I really appreciate that, man.
Yeah, it's very kind of you.
We had another super chat from Raymond Harton. Raymond, thank you so much. He says, just for support. Thank you guys for all of your hard work. Good luck with the young and Ryan. And yes, that's my Southern accent. LOL. I appreciate it, man. Appreciate it. All I know, Raymond, is this is definitely Brian Kelly's burner. Obviously, it definitely has to be. So
yes.
Another super chat. Thank you so much from Just Your Ordinary Joe. Ryan, Ari, your work schedule, uncertainty of the immediate future. My only humble advice as a father for is a quote, let it play out.
There you go. There you go. My man Joe. Yep.
That's a good
is
one,
also
man.
one of the OGs, Ryan. Joe's been around from the beginning. So yeah, we saw him in a game. He had an IB shirt on and then lifted that IB shirt on and had another IB shirt on underneath with his IB hat. So Joe's my dude. That's my dude.
That's
so
awesome.
Yeah, thank you for that, Joe. I did want to bring up this question down here, Ryan, which is a good one. It was about because it is Memorial Day weekend, and obviously this is a for me as you know, I lost my grandfather several years ago. He fought in World War II. It's something I'm very proud of, his service and you know, everybody knows I'm a big history buff and obviously World War II and stuff like that. But Douglas Road Roundabouts asks, in honor of Memorial Day, what is your favorite World War II movie? I have a confession to make. I haven't watched a ton of World War II movies. In fact, first time I watched Saving Private Ryan, I think was in like the last year. I'm more of a documentary guy. It was very good. I'm more of a documentary guy when it comes to like war and stuff. Like I don't necessarily, not that I dislike him, but I just didn't watch a ton of movies. I mean, I've seen some. I'd say if I were to say my favorites, it's two older movies. It's Midway and Patton. I thought Midway was very good and Patton was very good. They came out with a new Midway, and I didn't think I was going to like it, and I loved it. I thought it was tremendous because the graphics were phenomenal. Like the CGI in it was, I thought, tremendous, and the manner in which they told the story. So like. They wrapped more events into it, where the original Midway, obviously they talked about what happened at Pearl Harbor, but like they had some lead into it. They had sort of the relationship that one of the main intelligence guys had with Admiral Yamamoto. They kind of looked. They had some stuff, more stuff up from the Japanese side of things. I thought that how they tied in Midway and then some of the other they even included like the Doolittle raid off the Hornet as part of it, like how it all tied together and led to that decisive battle at Midway. I thought it was fascinating. And obviously, you know, the battle didn't start off well for the United States. I mean, because they just had like the United States, I felt from what I've read, not what I felt like I was hanging out at the time studying it, but what I've read is the United States had phenomenal pilots, but they had subpar planes early on. And it was really a lot of the success on Midway was some of it was luck. Some of it was just, you know, pilots sticking to their guts. Like one of the things that led like the first couple waves of American planes just got obliterated. And because they had, it didn't start off well. They didn't have air cover. And then the the torpedoes weren't working. The dive bombers didn't have air cover, so they were just getting picked apart by the Zeros and like got no hits. When the first big assault happened, they had lost the Japanese fleet, and some like destroyer was kind of way behind and was trying to get caught up with the rest of the fleet, and they saw it and they followed it into the fleet. They just stayed behind it and they saw its wake and followed it into the fleet, and that's when they first started having success. And then they were able to, and there's some debate about the accuracy of this, but the thought is that when the Japanese thought that the United States was going to be in Pearl and that they thought that there would be time, well, the United States had broken their code and they knew Midway was a target, so they were actually there. And so when they found out that the United States carriers were there, because at the time, the United States was down to 3 carriers, and the Yorktown was badly damaged because they had lost Saratoga in I forget which battle, but one of the battles in Asia, like over in the Southeast Asian areas, they had lost a couple carriers. Saratoga got sunk. I think Lexington got sunk. So the Yorktown Hornet and Enterprise, and Japan at the time had like 10 carriers, and then there were 5 in this fight on Midway. And so they were gonna originally, I think they were originally going to have like the dive bombers to attack Midway, because that was a big supply line for like Pearl in the United States. And so they decided to redo, like, to take off and put torpedo bombs on there, I think, or they were going to change basically the type of bombs they had on their planes. And so then that gave the United States time to find them and hit them. And one of the carriers actually they were in the middle of doing the changeover, and they just dropped one bomb, dropped it, and it dropped right into to where all the ammo was, and just destroyed it. And so they sunk, I think it's like 4, actually they had 4 in this fight, I think, 4 carriers, and they sunk all 4 of them. That's crazy. And that completely changed the tide of the war. But a lot of it was just, they had great pilots. And both sides had great pilots early on, but then Japan's strategy of kamikaze ended up just wiping out their good pilots, and that was part of it too. But the United States could just produce so much quicker, Ryan. That was the big thing, is like they went from 3 carriers to like 30 plus, because the industrial might of the United States. And part of the reason Japan wanted to fight the United States they did that, is because I think it was something like 80-90% of their oil they had to import, because they just don't produce oil in Japan. And so the United States was making life tougher on them. And they thought that by doing this, it would allow them to open it up. And once they lost that battle, they just couldn't produce the way the United States could. And so that was a huge change. But like all the stuff documentaries around that are great. But the Midway movie, Ryan, I don't know if you've seen it. It came out in the last, like, I think 3 or 4 years. It's really well done. I would encourage you to watch it. If anyone watched the original, it's different than the original. The storylines, they do a really good job of sticking to the historicity of it, which I love. And I thought Patton was a great movie too. I'm a big Patton fan. But I haven't seen a ton of World War II movies, to be honest. Like, I never saw Band of Brothers, this TV series Band of Brothers. I never saw that.
I haven't either.
But yeah, I've seen a lot more Revolutionary War movies than I've seen World War II movies. But the Patriots probably my favorite Revolutionary.
It's my dad's favorite, man. I think we talked about that before. My dad loves The Patriot, man.
Yeah,
he loves that movie.
Yeah, and I thought the John Adams series on HBO was incredibly well done.
I think my dad's seen that as well.
And much more historically accurate than The Patriot was.
Yes,
so
I believe that. I definitely believe that.
And they never said that it was a historical movie. It was an entertaining movie. I mean, Benjamin Martin's character was fictitious. They weren't trying to pretend that it was a real story.
Historical fiction. I mean,
right?
That's my wife loves that type of genre as far as like books and stuff. Like, she loves reading historical fiction. So I dig it.
Yeah.
I dig it. Saving Private Ryan is a great one, though. I think that is it's a crowd pleaser. Yes.
Yeah, it's a good one, and
we should do a podcast on just Tom Hanks movies. That would be fun. That would be fantastic.
It's a lot of shows. It's a lot of shows. Yeah. All right, let's get back on track here.
John A1 says, how difficult is it for a coach to teach young quarterbacks to go through his reads and progressions?
Depends on the kid. I mean, so much of this stuff, John, it depends on the kid. Some kids are really pick it up quickly, and some need time. It really does. Usually by the end of your freshman year, kids should start to figure it out at the latest, the end of your freshman year. But sometimes it really takes a kid 2 full years in the system to really get it down. And, that's not abnormal. That's why experience matters. I mean, I can promise you that Trevor Lawrence was doing a lot more from a read standpoint in 2020 than he was in 2018.
Oh, sure.
Right. I mean, they kept things pretty basic for him in 2018. He was just so physically gifted and his talent around him was so good and the schedule was so weak that they could do those basic things. And then by the time they got to the playoff, he had a lot more experience and could do a little bit more than he maybe did earlier in the year. But even a guy like him, Ryan, you weren't doing like 15 full field reads a game with him in 2018.
Yeah. Well, the frustrating thing about Trevor Lawrence is there's some reads sometimes where you're like, dude, that is not where you're supposed to go against cover 2 or cover 3. But then he would still fit it in because it's just like, gosh, like, what do I do with that type of kid, man? Like, what do you do with him?
I think that's something that's hurt him in the NFL a little bit, Ryan, to be completely honest with you, because
in year 1,
I don't think the coaching at Clemson was great. I don't think their scheme was great. I don't even think in his junior year that they had him doing a ton of NFL reads. Like, it's a very college-oriented offense, or at least was a very college-oriented offense. And that's why, I think we started to see him figured out a little bit more this year.
Yep. Took a big jump this year.
And I think there's more there to be done by him as far as making jumps, because I think the physical part is he's starting to figure that out more. And I think the other aspect of it too, Ryan, is I think he's understanding how much more important like timing is.
Yeah.
And so what I think you're going to start to see as he gets more experience, I think you're going to see him start to make more plays. I mean, he threw for over 4,000 yards. Again, it was 17 games, but 25 touchdowns, 8 picks. You're going to see him start to be even more impactful, throwing the ball down the field and making some more of those tough plays.
Sometimes those guys that are like Superman, like they can just do whatever they want to. That's one thing about Caleb Williams, Ryan, is I think that some people don't talk enough about. Caleb is not he's not the best quick game thrower of all time. He's not the most like anticipatory thrower of all time. You know why? Because he can do what he did against Notre Dame and just like, I'm going to look. You can't tackle me. I'm going to break a tackle. Now I'm going to spin out. Now I'm going to throw in the run. Like he can play the hero ball stuff that sometimes those kids, they need maturation early on in the NFL. And some guys can get through it, like Trevor Lawrence, for instance. Other guys are like Zach Wilson, where it's like, just can't do it. Like, just can't do it. It's just gone at this point. Like the window is gone already. So yeah, I think that some of those guys that are those hero ball, Superman type of players that can make things magic happen sometimes rely too much on that in the college level. That's just kind of what I think. Like, I don't think Caleb Williams was incredibly on time as a passer consistently last year for USC, but he could just do some things where you're just like, all right, I can't teach that though. Like, I can't teach a kid to be that talented. Like, I just can't. So he has that innate ability, which Trevor also had. He was incredible when things broke down.
Irish blooded. It was the Battle of Coral Sea. So Irish blooded put that in. That is correct. I think that's the one where they lost. I'm pretty sure they lost Saratoga and possibly Lexington. I think both of those battles. So yeah, they were. So I couldn't remember which one it was, because I remember the Philippines, the Battle of the Philippines, the Philippine Sea or whatever. That was one where it was a wipeout, but it was that's one I was going to say earlier. But that was actually the Americans had a lot of success. That came after Midway. The Americans had a lot of success. There's a lot of people saying movies that I want to see. So All's Quiet on the Western Front is an old movie that they redid.
I've seen that.
I think it's like on.
I've seen that.
I haven't seen that one yet. I heard it was really good.
It's a book too, right? Isn't it a book?
Yeah,
I think I've read the book as well.
And it was a much older. I heard it's really good. I want to see it. Did you like it, Ryan?
I think I did enjoy it. Yeah, I haven't seen it in a long time, but yeah, I'm pretty sure I did enjoy it when I watched it.
And I also want to see Dunkirk. That's one that I've been wanting to see. I just haven't had time for it. That was another interesting one that I want to see.
Dunkirk's the one where it's like very. I think that their camera style was like very like first person, where like they're just running through battle and all that type of stuff, right? Like, wasn't that Dunkirk?
I think that's 1917.
Is that 1917? Could be.
That's the one where the British soldiers are they have to get some kind of thing to another like to the front line or to the garrison or something
Oh,
like
is
that.
that one? Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I haven't seen that one either, but
I
I did
saw the
see it.
behind the scene filming of at least one of those where it was like very like first person running and stuff. Yeah.
That was 19 set. Now I think there's some of that in Dunkirk as well, based on what I saw in the previews, but I haven't seen the previews for that one yet. I mean, I haven't seen either one of those yet, but I heard Dunkirk was really well done. I just haven't had a chance to watch it yet. I will at some point in time. Y'all don't realize I work a lot, y'all. I mean, there's a lot of movies I want to go see. There's a movie out now I want to go see called Nefarious that I've been dying to see. I just haven't been able to make time to go see it. I need to go see that one here soon as well.
We used to go to the movies all the time, man. We just don't have time anymore.
Yeah.
Just don't have time. So
yeah. It's not that it's too expensive. It's just me and Ange, and we have a membership there, so they're not as cheap. But I just don't have the time. I really don't. Somebody asked if I'm going to go see the new Oppenheimer movie. Maybe that one's probably one I'll probably wait till it comes out. I don't like some movies you need to see.
I did see the previews for that. I saw
it looks very interesting. I don't know if that's one I'm going to go see at the theaters though. Because like the way I decide that is some movies you just got to see in a theater. Like the Avengers movies, those are just you got to see it the first time in a theater, right? Like Maverick, you got to see that one in a theater. Some movies I'm like, I can wait till that one comes out. Like, and my wife's like, let's go see this rom-com. I'm like, yeah, we can wait till it comes out on TV. We don't need to go see that in a theater. I'm good. All right, let's all right, here we go. Let me ask this one, Ryan, because I don't know that I have an opinion of it. Rank the different racing options you prefer to watch, either in person or on TV: NASCAR, Indy, Formula One, or horse racing.
None of the above for me, sir.
Right. So I'll answer that one. I don't particularly care much for horse racing, to be honest with you. I'm not a fan. I've never watched Formula One. I've watched some NASCAR races. Just doesn't do it for me. I'll tell you this though, I loved as a kid watching the Indy 500 because it's always around Memorial Day weekend, correct?
Yes.
I used to love watching that as a kid. I don't know why I liked that, but not NASCAR. I have no idea why. I've tried to do the NASCAR thing. It just, I don't know, maybe because the cars were so cool looking. They weren't like just normal car, like looking kind of cars, but I did. I haven't watched an Indy 500 in decades, like since I was a kid, but I loved watching it as a kid. I really did. I thought it was really cool. And I'm trying to remember the guy's name who I was a big fan of. He's an older guy, like AJ Foyt or something like that. But I used to always like watching him. But because you always pick your favorites, even when you're a kid, like, oh, that's my favorite for some reason. But I did enjoy watching Indy 500 as a kid. I haven't watched. I don't watch any others, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I've never been much of a racing guy.
I've heard NASCAR is really cool to be at in person. It's just not something that interests me.
I've heard that as well, but then I saw the Final Destination movie and that ruined it for me. So okay,
what happened there? It's not one of those ones where something really bad happened and somebody.
Yeah, I forget which Final Destination it was, but they were at a race and then like a car like went off the tracks and a bunch of people died and there was an explosion and all that good stuff. So yeah.
There's another war movie that came out that I wanted to see and I haven't, and I'm trying to remember the name of it. It was the same guy that was sort of the jerky pilot in Maverick was in this other one, and I think it was actually a Korean War movie, actually, now that I think of it. But I'm trying to remember the name of it. But it looked really good too. It's the guy in it is the guy that plays Kang in the new and I can't remember the name of the dang movie
in Doctor Strange.
No, he plays Kang. Well, all of them. He played it in Loki and then also in Ant-Man and the new Quantumania, which I haven't seen any of the new Avenger ones. But yeah, I can't remember the name of it. I can't remember the name of it. I have to go look it up, but that looked good too. But the problem is I looked up what happened to the lead character in real life, and it made me not want to go see it because I knew I'd get sad. So I was like, man, I don't want to watch it now because this is going to make me sad.
Someone said I haven't watched NASCAR since Ricky Bobby won at Talladega. That's fantastic.
Now, that was my favorite NASCAR race. Yes, there's no doubt about that.
Oh, Ricky Bobby's so funny. I'm going to have to watch that again.
That is great.
So funny.
That is great.
Question from Nate M. says, with Notre Dame's new focus on long, athletic kids, is it safe to assume we'll size up better than years past when we face the Bamas, Georgias, etc.? And will that turn into better results against those teams?
Well, okay, so can we separate Bama and Georgia real quick a little bit? Because Notre Dame's played 2 games against Georgia and they've lost by combined 7 points, and they had the ball with less than 2 minutes in each game with a chance to win. Okay, it's Bama that's dominated Notre Dame. That's it. I mean, Ohio State hasn't dominated Notre Dame like they did, like Bama has. Bama dominated Notre Dame. Notre Dame had a chance to win in both of those games, and if they had a better quarterback in both of those games, they'd have won. So Notre Dame has matched up just fine with Georgia, and then they've played. Now, would they match up as well with current Georgia? I don't know. They've had some teams that would not match up well against current Georgia. The way they're recruiting now, do I think they will match up better with Georgia if they have to play each other the next couple of years? Yeah, I do. Good enough to win? We'll see. We'll see. I mean, that's not an easy game to win for anybody. But I think to the specific question that Nate's asking, Ryan, I think that's part of the reason that they're doing what they're doing is because that's the way to match up with those teams, to where you don't try to beat them with a bunch of try-hard guys and then 2 or 3 studs, which is basically what Notre Dame was kind of doing in 2020 against Bama. It's like a bunch of try-hard guys on defense, and then you've got your Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah and your Kyle Hamilton, but then the rest are mostly just try-hard guys. Yes. Right. What they're trying to do is they're trying to get more of those really long guys, Nate, to your point, to your question of, hey, look, maybe not all 4 of last year's defensive linemen pan out, but if 2 of them do, they're going to be really good. Maybe not all the guys like Cole Mullins and Bryce Young and Logan Thomas pan out, but if a couple of them do, they're going to be really good. And they're basically saying if we're going to err on the side of a player, we're going to err on the side of the kid with those physical traits that we look for, as opposed to the kid who's a great high school football player, but just maybe lacks the length or the size or the this thing or the that thing to really be that high ceiling guy. So like a guy like J.D. Bertrand is at the very least going to be exactly what he is, a 3-year starter, a captain, a really good football player, just a guy you want. But then you don't want necessarily I think Jack Kaiser's is a very underrated football player. I think JD, but in an ideal world, you've only got one of them, and they're surrounded and flanked by a Nolan Ziegler, a Jalen Sneed, a Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, a Jalen. Right? That's the thing. It's kind of like Notre Dame's been. This is the problem with Notre Dame. And Nate, you this has sparked something in me that think's a great point is Notre Dame has had the perfect team in the last 10 years. They just haven't been able to have it in the same year. And here's what I mean by that. With J.D. Bertrand, it's like he's a really solid player. Jack Kaiser, but they're not flanked by that Jalen Smith, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah type of guy. Then when they had like Jalen Smith, they didn't have a J.D. Bertrand type of guy at Mike linebacker. Dan Fox is not that. J.D. Bertrand's a much better football player, in my opinion, than Dan Fox was and Carlo Calabrese was, in my view. If you could have had a J.D. next to him, then maybe you'd have that. And we can do this about everything. Oh, those years they had those great O-lines, they didn't have a great quarterback in the passing game. The years they've had a really good passing game, they didn't have a very good defense. They just have never been able to put it all together. But to your point, I think that the more you focus on physical traits over maybe some of the other things, I think the greater chance you have of getting more elite level players on the field than the other way around, where you're trying to beat them with a couple elite guys and a bunch of really sound try-hard guys. And I think that's the difference. They're taking more chances on the ceilings and being willing to risk that some of the floors are on the side. That's how I read current recruiting compared to the way it was, Ryan. Do you agree with that? And to answer his question, I do think that gives them a better chance as long as the quarterback is good enough to then line up against the Bamas and the Georgias and the Ohio States and to win those games. But the only team that they need better results against in regard to being competitive is Bama. They need to learn to beat all of them because they haven't. But I think that's something that's helped them with Clemson last year. It's because they could literally line up against Clemson and say, we're bigger and we're badder than you. And no one else you've played this year is bigger and badder than you. But we are. And there's not a dang thing you can do about it. That would not have happened in 2021 or 2020 even. They couldn't just line up and run. They had some big plays, but they had a very balanced attack against Clemson in 2020. If they couldn't throw the ball in 2020, they don't beat Clemson at home, in my opinion. It was the big plays down the field that helped them win that game. And so, yeah, I think it's a good observation, in my opinion. It's a good observation.
Well, I think there's some position, especially that you've looked at Notre Dame and you've just been like, that looks a lot different than what Georgia, Alabama, those types of teams are trotting out there. I mean, I think of defensive line. I think of linebacker. until the last couple of years, I would say cornerback was also a position that I look at and say, like, there was like even Julian Love and Troy Pride, that was a really good cornerback group. They still look physically different than like Tyson Campbell and Eric Stokes, for instance. Right? Like it just looks a little bit different. It just looks different. Linebacker looks different than some of those other premier programs that we've seen over the last few years. Defensive line certainly looks different. I mean, if you compare Notre Dame's defensive line over the last couple of years to like a Georgia, for instance, the reason that Georgia's been so good, in my opinion, Nate, is that it's not just Jalen Carter. It's not just Jordan Davis. It's not just Devontae Wyatt. It's those guys come out, and here comes Michael Williams, and here comes Bear Alexander, and here comes Warren Brinson, and here comes – they just have so much impact size in certain positions that I just don't think Notre Dame has right now all around. Like they just don't. They need to get more of it. They're starting to get more of it. And I think that's great, is that the 2023 defensive line class, I think, is a great illustration to this question. If you just look at those kids, like as an evaluator or someone just walking past them, you could look at them with no pads on or everything and be like, if I told you that defensive end group right there plays at Alabama, you would believe them because they look like it. They're all 6'4 plus. They're all long. They're all athletic. That's the difference. And I think that decreases margin for error. The longer, more athletic you get, that allows you to match up and not have deficiencies in certain areas. So yes, I think that it is massive, and I think it will pay dividends if it's developed properly. Because I don't care how good Boubacar Traore looks in person, if he isn't a good football player, it doesn't matter, right? Because he's not going to make an impact when it all matters and all said and done. So it needs to be developed.
That's the big key, though, Ryan. When you're going to recruit this way, you better make sure you've got very good developers, because you can't recruit. Boubacar is a great example. Armel Mukam, Brendan Vernon, Bryce Young, and just say, well, they're just so talented, we're going to trot them out there, they're going to be good. No, they need to be developed. They absolutely need to be developed. That is a great. And this next question from John A1 kind of, talking D-line a little bit. I think it's a nice transition into this question.
Yeah. John's question, which two defensive linemen must Al Washington develop at their potential in 2023, assuming the player puts in the work for the defense to be good?
I mean, to me, I think it's the two guys that are going to be playing side by side, and it's Riley Mills and Jordan Botelho. I think those are the two keys, because and we talked about this yesterday with Tim, Ryan. If this defensive line is going to be playoff caliber, those two guys, to me, more than any others, have to be dudes. Now, look, Jason Onye needs to help. Javonte Jean-Baptiste needs to be a good player. Howard Cross, all those guys are important. But to me, those two have the most star potential for this particular team. And maybe some more have some, Josh Burnham, I think, has a higher ceiling than Jordan Botelho, but it won't be in 2023. It'll be, he'll be a better player in 24 and 25 than Botelho was in 23, but I don't know if he's going to be better than Botelho in 23. Junior Tuihalamaka is going to be important to this defense this year as a key rotation figure, all those type of things. But you need the stars to play like stars. You have to at least have guys that you at least have some guys that can kind of play big in those big games. And I don't know that the 2018 defensive line had any individual stars, but they were really good across the board, and they were money. Khalid Kareem was money. And that's the thing for me that they're going to need. So they're going to need a couple of those guys to step up and be dudes. And I think those two guys for me are the highest ceiling guys for 2023, in my opinion. I'm not sure would you add Baptiste into that conversation, or are you comfortable with those two guys?
I wouldn't, because I just think that he's a 6-year kid that's a little bit closer to his ceiling. Like, he just hasn't played a ton, right? So it's more of a volume perspective. I don't think that we definitely haven't seen the best of Jordan Botelho. We still have no idea 100% of what we're going to get from Botelho. And Riley Mills, I think Riley Mills was a good player last year, but I don't think I've seen anything close to as good as Riley Mills could be. So that would be the two picks for me as well. It's like Howard Cross is what Howard Cross is. He's a good player. Javonte Jean-Baptiste, I think, is closer to his ceiling, though, than like Riley Mills and Jordan Botelho are. I think that the jury is still out of both those players, and they could be potential game changers. I mean, I would not be shocked if Jordan Botelho has 10 sacks next year. I also wouldn't be shocked if he has 5, because it's just like he's not a full-time player. Like, he's a rotational player. So I think that those guys are vital. And Riley Mills transitioning inside and making plays and being impactful is huge for Notre Dame. I don't think we talk about that enough, that we need Riley Mills to be good in 2023 if you're Notre Dame.
Andre Tonsel, so are you guys going to do a breakdown on all the teams on Notre Dame schedule this summer or in the fall? Yes, we will do that. It'll be later in the summer. We'll do some things as we kind of get into, like, we're going to have a lot of team breakdowns. So we're obviously working on the schedule. We're going to actually start our position group breakdowns next week. Vince and I are going to actually do a show on Tuesday, starting with quarterback. And so we'll do position groups, and then we'll do other like areas where we'll start breaking down the team. So that's going to start next month, which starts next week. But and Sean's already started so Sean Stiers has already done 2 interviews now with opposing beat writers. So he's doing that angle, talking. And I think, USC was yesterday, I think.
USC was yesterday. Yep.
And then last week, I think it was Ohio State. So he's doing that there. But we will do our dive into the opponents as we get closer to the season. So it'll be sometime in July when you get at Andre. And then, of course, we'll have some stuff on the team. And we're going to have some fun with it. We're going to break it down by quarter. So like quarter 1, so that'll be games 1 through 3, and then 4 through 6. We're also going to do what we did last year, which will be fun, like the all opponent teams and who has the best back, ranking the backfields, ranking the offensive line. So we're going to have some fun with it. But honestly, right now, and I'm not saying, Andre, you're not asking us to do this now. I'm just explaining why we're going to do it later, because there's so much portal action, Ryan, that still is going to happen with kids picking schools that, it's like, I want to let all that dust settle a little bit. And then as we get into July, that dust will be settled, and then we'll have a better idea of what the teams are going to look like, and it'll help us. So we'll rank the schedule then, and we'll do all that stuff. So we'll have a lot of opponent stuff coming up this summer. We're going to focus first in June on recruiting, obviously, but also when it comes to the team stuff, which we'll be doing a lot of team shows, we'll be doing we'll be doing position breakdowns first, and then some other thematic stuff about the team as well. So just wanted to answer that question here real quick. And some people are saying Dunkirk was bad. That makes me sad, because it looked it's a great story, first of all, but the previews look good. So that makes me sad that you guys are saying it stinks. That makes me not want to watch it as much. I probably still will watch it at one point in time, but that's a bummer. That's a bummer.
John A1 says, can Tobias Merriweather be a physical at the catch points with playoff level secondary players? Can he? Yes, he can. I mean, he's tall, and I think, John, like he's going to be a year older. He's going to be a year under Coach Bayless, obviously, and be able to really fill out his frame. He's going to be 6'4". He's going to be 205 plus pounds at the start of the season, more than likely. So yeah, he can. I think he can. Mm-hmm. I mean, we have to see it, obviously. We've only seen 1 career receptions for Tobias Merriweather, but if you're asking me, can he? Yeah, I think he can. I think him and Deion Colsey could both be that type of guy. I also think Jaden Greathouse could be that kind of guy. If you're just talking about a physical catch point dude, like Jaden Greathouse, I have high opinion on him potentially being a guy that if the ball's up in the air, that he can come down with it. So yes, you can.
He's got to show it like everybody else, but yeah, and I think he's gotten a lot stronger since last year. Could he have done that consistently last year? No. Is he going to look like Chase Claypool in 2019 this year doing that? No. But yeah, he'll be able to do it. I mean, because he's doing it. Here's the thing that's going to help him, John. He's going to have to do it on a daily basis in fall camp and over the summer, because he's going to be going against Cam Hart and Benjamin Morrison. So the good thing is he's going to be doing it against playoff level secondary players. And I think that helps a ton. I mean, I've said this before. I think a big reason why Julian Love and Troy Pride were so good in 2018 is they had to guard Miles Boykin and Chase Claypool all summer and all. I mean, that especially poor Julian Love, like Miles Boykin and Chase Claypool, especially Miles Boykin, just abused Julian Love in practice in the spring and the summer and the fall. And it's partly what made Julian so good is because he, like, when he'd get to Saturdays, it's like, I've yet to face a group of receivers as good as the guys I go against every single day in practice. That's why it's important to have a loaded roster, Ryan, because you get to Saturdays and you're like, this is nothing. I've been facing this all the time. And that's like when you're an offensive line like Notre Dame's and you're facing your undersized defensive line, and then you go play a team like Georgia or Alabama, and you're like, we're not used to this kind of. But as you get bigger and longer, going back to, I think it was Nate, right? Nate's question, I think, earlier.
Yep.
When you're facing that in practice every day, boy, it makes you more prepared for those type of things. And so I think those things all factor into it, in my opinion. So yeah, good We'll see, right? It's going to be. I mean, it's going to be important. It's going to be important.
It
We got a
is.
super chat from DJ. DJ just says, "Just saying, thank you, IB.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome, DJ, and thank you, my friend, for sending that to us. So I really appreciate that. Really appreciate it very much. All right, Let's answer this question.
From Domer TX22 says, does a part of you think Owen Wafel was maybe looking at Michigan more than being insinuated? I really struggle to see how Notre Dame could want to part ways after his latest highlights.
I get this a lot, and I think people are trying to justify the decision that Notre Dame made. Notre Dame has backed off kids in the past because they're going to go visit other schools. I don't know why the sources that I talked to wouldn't say that if that's what was happening. Do I think that he wanted to visit Michigan? Sure. What we don't know is why. Is it because he just wanted to look at Michigan more, or was he getting the vibe that they don't really want me in this class and I need to look around? Right. That's what we don't know. We can debate it till the end of time. All that I can tell you is this, that according to my sources, and this is sources that I've talked to on every side of this conversation, Notre Dame did not want him in the class anymore. They just thought that they had better fits and better players. Simple as that. So if this was about Wafel looking in Michigan, I think it would make more sense for Notre Dame to say, well, we wanted him, but
instead of making it look like you dropped the kid.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
It makes them look worse to say they dropped it. So I got to take them at their word, because the thing that the people I've talked to are insisting is actually the thing that makes them look worse in this situation. So I have a hard time believing that they're not being honest, when it would be much easier for them to save face and say, hey, look, we wanted him, but we have a policy, and he violated that policy. I mean, he did want to take the official visit to Michigan. That led to his decommitment, but it was one of those things where that just gave them the out they were looking for to say, hey, yeah, sure, do that. My question would be is what was the reason he was looking at Michigan? Was it because of he just liked Michigan, or because he knew already that they weren't wanting him as much? And so and that's what he decided to do. Was something said to him at some point in time that made him be like, hold on a second, that was weird? That's what I'm trying to find out. We haven't been able to find that out yet. But I think at the end of the day, the key thing here is Notre Dame didn't want him in the class anymore. It's not a decision I agree with. It's not a decision I like. It's not what I would have done, but it is what it is. And
I just also don't know how you got to that decision or that opinion of Owen Wafel. Like it just doesn't make much sense to me in that regard, but whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very strange.
Very strange. I mean, you took the kid when he was a 6'2", 260-pound defensive lineman. Now he's a 6'3", 290-pounder that just had 20-something tackles for loss and 10 sacks. Like,
that's what I don't get. Like, if you were going to drop him, you should have dropped him off of his sophomore film when you took his commitment.
Yes.
But that is what it is. It is what it is. This is a question I'm not sure I have an answer to, Ryan. Stevie Wonder asks, who are the top 3 defensive coordinators in college football?
Jim Leonard's not a defensive coordinator right now, right? He's jobless at the moment.
Well, that's the thing is there's some of those guys have gotten jobs. Like some of those guys are head coaches now. Like I probably would have had Brent Venables. I don't think much of Brent Venables as a head coach, but I liked him as a defensive coordinator. I think my number one defensive coordinator in college football is to me an easy one right now, and that's Phil Parker at Iowa. I think he's the best defensive coordinator in college
he's
football.
Excellent.
I mean, talk about getting the most out of your talent, and development is elite at that school. I mean, they're constantly getting these 3-star kids no one ever heard of and turn them in. They had 2 top 20 NFL draft picks off their defense this year. And then the Broncos took another guy in the 3rd round, the DB. Yep. So, and they do that all the time.
Riley Moss.
So, I mean, Ryan, they do a great job of developing. He is numero uno on my list without question. So outside of that,
Did some of these lists of defensive coordinators, because I'm looking for names, Brian. This list has Alex Grinch as the 7th best defensive coordinator in college football.
Are you looking at the same one that's from Saturday Down South that has Kevin Steele at Miami, number 9, which is such a joke? Pete Golding at 10. Like, this is the problem. You look at these. Ryan's uncle Ron at Baylor is number 11 on that list. I'm joking. It's Ron Roberts. I'm just kidding. And some of these are difficult too, like the Georgia guys, Will Muschamp and Glenn Schumann. Like I'm tempted to say that duo is in my top group, but you get down
Joe Rossi's a good one though from Minnesota. That's a good
Yeah,
one.
he's very good. But then you ask yourself,
Morgan
are they
Scally
good?
from Utah is very good as well. Scally's
Yeah.
very good at Utah.
Hey, Ryan, real quick. I don't know if something happened to your mic, but you're
Okay.
now off with your talking and your visual, and you're popping a little bit. So it just started within the last like 2 minutes. So I don't know if you pulled a Brian and hit the mic cord or what. But yeah, Ryan and I are looking at the same list, and these lists are really just a joke because we look at these to kind of refresh our memories about who they are. Jim Knowles is a guy that gets a lot of love for top 3. I got to see more of him, to be honest with you. Morgan Scally, I think, is John Heacock from Iowa State's a good one. I think he's a good one. I'm not putting him in my top 5, but I think Pete Kwiatkowski is a really solid defensive coordinator. I thought he did a really nice job at Washington. I think he's done a solid job at Texas. I think he inherited a bit of a tough situation, but a lot of the top guys are not really their head coaches now. Like Derek Mason did a terrible job at Oklahoma State. 10 years ago, he's in my top 5. When he was at Stanford, he's absolutely in my top 5. But there's a lot of overrated defensive coordinators too, Ryan. I mean, some of these guys in this list, like Mike Tressel was a defensive coordinator for 1 year. He inherited a great defense. Like, what are we doing here? Like, seriously? Some of these
Tony
lists
Gibson's
are
a
bad.
good one for NC State. That's a good one.
He's a really good defensive coordinator. Zach Arnett, I thought, did a really nice job at Mississippi State, but he's the head coach now. So, I don't know where I could put him on that list either. But it's a good question. It's a good question. I don't know that I have I think Brad White at Kentucky's done a really nice job. I think the last couple of years, I think he's relatively new there, isn't he, Ryan?
I'm not sure about that one.
But I mean, they play good defense at Kentucky. But then you get into again, like, okay, but is it him or is it because he's been there since 2019? But they have quality defenses. But is it because of him or is it because of Mark Stoops? That's always the challenge when you have a defensive coordinator that's having success for a team whose head coach is a defensive guy. I mean, Ryan, last year Kentucky went to a bowl game and their offense averaged 20.4 points per game. You got a pretty darn good defense when you're
with the second round quarterback as well.
Yeah, exactly. Give me a freaking break. So it's a good question, Steve. I'd have to think about that one. I would really have to think about that one. All right, let's get down to some more here. Here's one from Coach Bent.
Coach Bent said, would you rather Notre Dame stay on NBC? What they would have complete say on the broadcast team, even if they were employed by another network, i.e. BQ or Notre Dame Picks Network, with no say in broadcast team.
The broadcast team to me is not at my top priority. It's fun, but for me, since I don't necessarily always watch the games and I can easily mute it if the broadcast team stinks, what matters more to me is the quality of the broadcast and whether or not that organization really values you. And I have never felt like NBC. Well, I don't know. I shouldn't say never. Since I started covering Notre Dame, Ryan, I don't think that I could say that I felt like NBC valued Notre Dame. The quality of the broadcast never improves. They use Notre Dame as like their minor league system. They keep putting these guys like Jason Garrett and Drew Brees in there that they're trying to get ready and promote for the next level. And now we've got like Jack Collinsworth and Jason Garrett. It was such a bad broadcast this year, in my opinion. I just been muted. Doug Flutie for all those years. I've never felt that they had good broadcast teams, but that's not my biggest problem with NBC. I can mute those guys. My biggest problem with NBC is the quality of the product, the production value. I've never felt was very good. And so I think that's the bigger issue for me. I just never felt like Notre Dame was a priority to them, to be honest with you. So I would still rather go with another network, Fox, CBS, somebody like that is going to do a better job with the quality of the game, the production of the game, the view of the game. I care a lot more about that than the broadcast team. So to your question, Coach, I would rather than pick another network, even if it means I can't guarantee that I'm going to have a broadcast team that I like, to be honest with you.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, because someone just said it's the minor league of announcers on NBC, right? So it's like
exactly that's what they do. They either get these names that they employ that don't do NFL anymore, like Doug Flutie, or they get some guy that they're trying to let's use Notre Dame games to give Drew Brees his chance to learn on the job so he can then come and be with us next year. And same with Jason Garrett. It's
Jason Garrett was the worst, though, man. Jason Garrett was the worst.
Yeah, it's like Notre Dame is like their this is our
test dummies,
practice squad. Yes, exactly. Test dummies. That's exactly, and they just never put value into the production, to be honest with you. Yeah. So yeah, I would rather them go somewhere else. I absolutely would rather them go somewhere else. So it's just me. That's my stance on that. I have strong feelings on that one.
We had a question from Timeout Tom who said Carter Nelson has the ability to play multiple positions. Could you see Notre Dame taking him as an athlete with position options rather than purely as a tight end? I mean, I think that they would take him as a tight end, Timeout Tom. I don't think that they would recruit him as an athlete. I think the only reason that you would recruit him as an athlete is to try to justify taking a second tight end if you don't have the need for a tight end, right? But I really do think that he's a tight end. He's going to be – do I think that he could play defense? I do. I do think he could play defense, but I do think that he has a much higher upside at tight end, which is why you recruit him as a tight end.
Yeah. Agree. Let's see. John's got a lot of questions about support staffs and coaches. Tell you what, John, shoot me a text or an email, and because that's a good topic to discuss, but it's not one that I'm going to have a good answer for on right now because there's so much coaching turnover. I couldn't even name all 10 coaches at some of these schools. So that's a very good question on that. He asked about the top 10 coaching staffs. I'd have to look at that one. I'd have to think about that one. So ask me that one. Send me a text or an email, and then I'll put that on my list, and we'll put that on either the summer, either for this show, or we may do it on CFB Nation. One of the two. We'll break that down. It'd be a fun one to do. Absolutely,
fun exercise.
Fun to do. Yeah.
Yep. We had a question from Coach Bent 574 says, if you could only have one deli meat from Boar's Head forever, which would you choose? It isn't the only thing you can eat, just the only Boar's Head product.
That's a tough one for me. I'd probably go oven roasted turkey, just because
I don't really eat that much deli meat, to be honest. So
I love their roast beef. I just don't know if I could eat roast beef as my only, like turkey. I know I could. If I could only eat turkey, I love turkey. I would eat it all the time. Roast beef, I gotta be sometimes in the mood for. But I'll tell you, my favorite deli sandwich, I make it at home, is I'll get a nice piece of either French or Italian bread, get some provolone cheese, and I'll get just a quality turkey. I use Dietz Watson here because it's the best that I can find. I can't find Boar's Head around here. I know people said that there's Boar's Head at like Kroger or something. I don't shop at Kroger. It's kind of far away. But it's a decent meat for around here. And I'll put actually turkey and roast beef together with provolone cheese. I'll toast it, and then I'll bake it, I should say, and then I'll put lettuce on it. That's a tasty sandwich, dude. That is a really tasty sandwich. But if I can only pick one of the two, I'd probably go with turkey. That's probably where I would go.
Does Coach Bent work for Boar's Head? Sounds like it's
I don't know.
Big
well, I had brought up one time that how much I love Boar's Head in the show. So yeah.
Gotcha.
Yep, big fan of Boar's Head meat. And my wife's dad used to be a distributor for Boar's Head. So yep.
Stevie Wonder. Wow. Thoughts on Kyle McCord? 5-star rating out of high school. How did you grade him out?
I liked Kyle McCord coming out of high school. I just never thought he was a 5-star. I thought the 5-star thing had more to do with Ohio State than it did him. I liked him. He was a top 100 guy for me for sure. I like Kyle McCord. I thought he's a decent athlete for a pocket guy. Has a nice arm. Doesn't have a bazooka for an arm, but has a nice arm. Threw a good deep ball in high school. Haven't seen him do that a ton in college, just because I haven't seen him play a lot in college. I didn't see him do it a lot in the spring game. But good accuracy, good decision maker. Guy can move around a little bit. He's not a runner, but he's got some pocket mobility. I think he's a good quarterback. I do. Is he going to be C.J. Stroud or Justin Fields? That, Ryan, I don't know.
Yeah,
but he's got good ability. I liked him. He's a PA kid. He came out of Pennsylvania. I've said this in the past. If he would have jumped in the portal, I'd have looked at him. Absolutely in the past, I'd have looked at him. Not now, because where they are now, but I absolutely would have looked at him in the past.
Brian, he is actually a New Jersey guy. Give it credit, okay? He
may have went to school in Philly. He played high school ball in Philadelphia. He went to school
at St. Joe's in Philly, but he is a New Jersey guy, my friends. He is a New Jersey guy.
he needed to go play good football, so he moved over to Pennsylvania. I get that.
Yeah,
Totally makes sense.
Sure.
But no, he's a good player. I liked him coming out of high school. I did.
Yeah.
Again, not a 5-star, but a very good quarterback. Very good quarterback. I think they'll be fine at quarterback this year.
I'm sure he'll do well. Yes, I'm sure
he'll put up numbers for sure. Will he make game-winning plays? That's always the question mark, right? With a new quarterback, but they'll put up numbers, especially when you look at the receiving core he's going to be throwing to and the running backs he's going to have around him. So he'll be fine.
It's going to be insane, man. Carnell Tate's probably going to be their 4th or 5th receiver to start the year, right? Where it's just like, man, man, it's pretty good.
Absolutely.
It's not bad.
Absolutely.
Stonador says, what would Freeman's Notre Dame career need to look like for him to make Notre Dame's head coach Mount Rushmore, top 4 coaches in history? Personally, I'd have mine as Knute Rockne, John Leahy, Errol Parseghian, and Lou Holtz in that order.
I think the only debate you could have is Leahy and Rockne 1 or 2. I mean, I think there could be a case is made that Leahy's dominance was even greater than Rockne's. Now, part of that is because Rockne was building the program up a bit. Not that the program wasn't good when I think they were pretty good when he played at Notre Dame, but Leahy was, they had a 4-year stretch where they didn't lose a game. That's pretty good,
Yeah.
And,
well, in order to answer this question firmly, though, it's like, who do you take off of there? Because that's how you measure it, right?
It would be Holtz. I think it's fair. Yeah, I think it's fair to say Coach Holtz, because I think when you look at Coach Holtz's tenure and you compare it to Errol Parseghian's tenure, for example, look, Coach Parseghian won 2 titles. Coach Holtz won 1, and that's ultimately what you're judged by as a college football coach. You're judged by your wins. I think that Coach Parseghian also had much greater consistency than Coach Holtz. Again, inherited different scenarios, but Coach Holtz's first 2 years weren't very good, and his last 3 years weren't very good. His 6 years in between were pure brilliance. But I would also argue that there was a couple teams under Coach Holtz that probably should have been better, or maybe won a title. There were some people argue that 92 team had no business, not playing for a title, losing those games. So they had a couple teams like that, but I think for him to, so I'll put it like this, Ryan. So Coach Holtz went 130-2 in his tenure, and I think he was there for 11 years, right? So see, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11.
130 and what? What was his record?
100 wins, 30 losses, 2 ties. Yeah, it's confusing. Yes. Coach Parseghian went 95, 17, and 4. So he would have had to go 5 and 13 in his next 2 years to match, to be down, to have the same record as Coach Holtz. Now, he was there, I believe, also for 11 years, but they didn't play as many games. They only played like 10 games a year. Yep. His record, his worst record ever was 8-3. And in that year, in 8-3 in 1972, they lost to number 9 Nebraska, number 1 USC, and Missouri. And now what some people will, I think, maybe counter with, and I don't know if it's already been put in the chat, Coach Holtz tended to play much tougher schedules than Coach Parseghian did as well. They had some of those years very tough schedules, and that was one of the knocks on Coach Parseghian. I don't know if I'd accept it or think it's valid to say, just some of the teams they played weren't as good, but they played USC every year, and USC was great back then. But it was 9-1, 7-2-1, 9-0-1, 8-2, 7-2-1, 8-2-1, 10-1, 8-2, 8-3, 11-0, 10-2, and he won 2 national titles. He had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 top 10 finishes. Coach Holtz went 5-6 in his first year, 8-4 in his second year, had a 6-5-1 season in 94, 9-3 and 8-3 were his last 2 years. He had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 top 10 finishes. So yeah, I think you have to go with, look, Lou Holtz is my favorite Notre Dame coach. He was the guy I grew up loving and following, and I have a phenomenal amount of respect for Coach Holtz. And but I'd be even willing to bet you that Coach Holtz would answer the question the same way that I just did, which is, Errol Parseghian won more titles, and that ultimately at Notre Dame is what you're evaluated on, is rings.
So
what would he have to
the
do? He'd have to
baseline
win
is 2 titles and 100 victories, right? At Notre Dame,
in more than 6 years of dominance, right? I mean,
Right.
that's what he'd have to do, in my opinion. The other way to surpass Coach Holtz is, let's say he's here 10 years and he only wins 1 title, but he has more years of that dominance that Coach Holtz had from 88 to 93. Notre Dame and Miami were without question the 2 best teams in college football, without question. The difference is Miami won more titles and Notre Dame only won 1. But I mean, they were Clemson and Alabama of the 15 to 19 type of stretch. So longer dominance and a title or 2 titles is what I would say Coach Freeman will have to do to be on that Mount Rushmore of coaches. But yeah, the first 3 are no brainers. Like Dan Devine's not on there. He had a title, but he's not on there. He had that 1 season and he built that all. He won that off Eris players, and he didn't have that level of dominance. It's those 4. And honestly, if you're going to say who the next one would be, it'd probably be Brian Kelly. But he's not even in the conversation because he didn't win a title or even really competitive for a title. You got to win a title to be considered that at Notre Dame. And so title and then consistent, because like you can't because like, winning a title doesn't get him on there, Ryan. If it's not a bunch of other great years, if he just has like that one magical year like Ed Orgeron has, but the rest of his resume is just then he's not on there,
or Les Miles, or
then he's Dan Devine. You've got to have consistency of you're really good for a period of time and win a title to be on that list.
Now let's talk about the Mount Rushmore of LSU head coaches. Can we do that?
If you want.
No, I don't want to. I'm just kidding.
Whatever.
Ryan Kelly's on there already. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Seriously. Ugh. Okay. Here's one from John A1.
John says Oklahoma drill scenario. You have to pick to play linebacker or running back. First rep, Charles Jagasaw versus Justin Scott. Second rep, Blake Fisher versus Riley Mills. Third rep, Billy Stroud versus Tyson Ford.
I have to pick to play linebacker or running back. Okay.
Wait, am I picking which one plays linebacker and which one plays running back?
Which one would I think you have to be? If it's in that matchup, which one would you rather be, the linebacker making a play behind Justin Scott or the running back making a play behind Charles Jagasaw?
Gotcha.
If I were to go with that first one, I would rather be the running back. If I were on the second one, I think I'd rather be the linebacker. And on the third one, I'd rather be the running back. That would be my pick.
So first one, I'd rather be the running back as well. I'd rather go against Justin Scott than Charles Jagasaw personally, just my opinion. Second rep. Oh my gosh. That's not fun. I would rather be the running back on number 2 as well. Actually, no, I would rather be linebacker on number 2, and I would rather go against Riley Mills. So Riley Mills would have to block me, or would I be the running back? I mean, third rep, Billy Stroud or Tyson Ford. I would rather be the running back against Tyson Ford than the linebacker against Billy Stroud. There we are.
By the way, the movie that I could not remember, Ryan, was called Devotion is the name of it. That was the name of it. Somebody just put that in the chat, but I could not for the line. I kept wanting to say Deliverance, but I'm like, nope, it ain't that. That's a much different type of movie than the one I'm thinking of. So I knew it was something with a D, but yeah, Devotion is the name of that movie. All right, here's an interesting one, Ryan.
John says, which group has the biggest impact on the 2023 Notre Dame team, the defensive line or the wide receivers?
Well, I don't know who will. I will say this. I hope that the defensive line has the bigger impact. And we discussed this a little bit yesterday, John. You can win a title without having a great dominant receiving core. Georgia just did it twice. Alabama had a couple teams that were really good that didn't have elite, in my opinion, elite receivers. You can't win a title, in my opinion, without a really good defensive line. And so the only way that I would say I'd be okay with the receivers being more impactful is if they're just the best receiving core in the country and the D-line's close behind, but the receivers are just that good. I don't see that happening. I think it's got to be the defensive line. Other than quarterback and maybe offense, I mean, it's the most important position on the defense to be good this year, in my opinion. They need that group to be really good.
It's probably unfair, but I feel more optimistic about the wide receivers than the defensive line right now. So in that instance, I would also go with the defensive line. One, yeah, a little bit, yeah.
Okay,
I don't know why.
I don't. I actually like the defense. I'm excited about the defensive line this year.
I'm excited about it. I just feel like I'm a little more excited about the wide receivers. I don't know if that's just what I saw in the spring or the blue gold game. I don't know, but I think
that you're just watching Jaden Greathouse going off, and you got all fired up because that's your dude. You and Salty. You know what I mean?
Salty's living the dream when he saw the great one with 11 catches for 118 yards, man.
Yeah. But which group will have the biggest impact? I mean, I really don't know. I mean, I don't know who it will. Well, do you at least agree with my sentiment that it needs to be the defensive line?
Yes.
Because that's the way I answered the question. I don't know who it's going to be. But I hope it's the defensive line and it's not because of the receivers. But like, Ryan, I mean, look, Alabama won a national title in 2011 when their leading receiver was Marquise Mays and their second leading receiver was Brad Smelly. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, you don't necessarily need – Yeah. Yeah, you don't necessarily need an elite guy. You know, like Calvin, 2016 they played for a title and their leading receivers are Darius Stewart. You know, they had Calvin Ridley on that team, but Calvin Ridley was not a dominant college player, in my opinion. He was a good college player. Wasn't a dominant college player. He wasn't like what Jerry Jeudy was in 18, for example.
Or Amari Cooper that one year.
Right. Devontae Smith. Exactly. I mean, he had 1 year of barely 1,000 yards. Amari Cooper the year before had 124 catches and over 1,700 yards. It was just a different animal.
Amari Cooper was unreal that year. Man.
Yeah, he was really good. Really good. So but one consistency, they always had great front sevens back then. I mean, that was the deal. And now recently they've had brilliant receiving corps almost every year. They're not winning as many titles. Why? Because they haven't been as good on defense. I still think you have to be able to, even in this era where you got to be able to score, you got to be able to make stops. I mean, offense wins championships now, but it's your defense has to be good enough to make stops. But where the key here, however, is you've got to get to the playoff first, and that's where the great defense comes into play. And I've said it before. Defense will get you to the show. To win it, you got to be able to score. I mean, that's what college football has become, in my opinion. All right, next question.
I didn't think I would hear Brad Smelly's name on a podcast anytime soon.
I know, right?
So that's what's
Seriously.
up. That's what's up.
Yep.
What are we doing here? Give me a flipping break. Says, rank the different racing options for viewing entertainment, either in person or on TV.
Different way of asking the previous question?
I guess so. So he wants to know how you would rank these difference of either in person or on TV.
I've never watched Formula One, so I can't answer that one. IndyCar, I've already said would be my one. NASCAR would be two, and I have zero desire to watch horse racing. I don't like horse racing. I don't like the premise of horse racing. It's just not my thing. So I've heard the Kentucky Derby's a good time, but I'm just not a fan of horse racing. It's just not my thing. It's not like it's inhumane. I don't know how horses are treated. I have no idea. I would love to be able to ride a horse. It's like you got these little dudes that are just like on top of a horse. And the horse is doing all the work. It's like, what's the skill there? I don't understand it. So I just really don't care about. It's about breeding and training. That's what it really comes down to. And it just doesn't interest me at all. So, it's not even on my list. Indy's the only one that I really have any experience with. So I'm going to go with that.
I guess NASCAR by default. We'll just leave it at that, I guess. I don't know.
What, as number two?
Yeah, I guess. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
Sure.
Yeah. Stevie Wonder says CJ Carr's
game is tailored. The Elite 11. How do you think he will finish?
I think he will do really well at the Elite 11 because, like you said, Stevie, I think that he is very good inside of structure. I think he'll go through his reads, and I think that he will work really well from the pocket. So I think CJ will be very good in Elite 11 segment.
Yeah, you're correct. I mean, I would imagine he'll finish in the top 2 or 3 if it's done based off the performance. I'll be surprised if CJ doesn't tear that up. I will. I mean, yeah, I'd be very surprised if he's not great at that.
He's built for that, right? Like the 7-on-7 game and all that, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
John Leahy says, what road game outside of Clemson will have the best atmosphere? Let me pull up the schedule again.
I'm going NC State. I think that's going to be a great atmosphere because you've got NC State, You've got Duke, you've got Louisville, you have Stanford and Clemson, and Clemson's out. Of those, I think it's going to be. NC State's got a pretty decent, pretty good fan base. Duke's small stadium. Louisville maybe. We'll see what their record is at that time. Stanford's going to be horrible, absolutely horrible environment. It'll be mostly more Notre Dame fans there probably than Stanford fans. Yeah, I'm going. It's kind of an easy one for me. I'm going to NC State. I think that's going to be It's early in the year. Expectations are going to be high. They're probably going to be 1-0 at that point in time. I'm going to NC State. You got a different one, Ryan?
I don't know enough about Duke fans, but I wonder if Duke's undefeated going into that football game, if Notre Dame's coming off an Ohio State victory, if there would be like, we're going to get up for that game, like that's insane.
They'll probably get up for it.
Blah, blah, blah. I don't know.
They'll probably get up for it, but I just don't know if it's an environment that's going to be super crazy. I mean, it's just not a strong fan base, and I believe. I could be wrong on this, but I believe it's a much smaller stadium too. Yeah, it's got almost 20,000 fewer people there than NC State's. NC State's is almost 58,000. Duke's is 40. So that really? I mean, so that's the other part of it too. And NC State has been in that stadium before. It's like a old school like the old bowl games, like the high rise on the side, and it's like open on one end, I believe. So I'll go NC State on that one. But I think the game could be bigger against Duke, Ryan, to your point. It's just which stadium environment will be better. That's a good question. What is Duke's schedule before they play Notre Dame in 23 this year? I'm curious about that. But they have a couple tough games. Let me see here. So Duke's plays Clemson in the opener. Oh, wow. Okay.
If they can win.
If they can win that game, they got a shot to be undefeated when they do play Notre Dame. They play Clemson at home. They play Lafayette. They play Clemson on a Monday. Then they play Lafayette that Friday.
Is that Louisiana Lafayette or is that the FCS Lafayette?
Yeah. The one in the Patriot League, the one the rival of Lehigh. Yeah, that Lafayette. Yes. The Leopards. Then they play Northwestern at home. Then they're at UConn before they play Notre Dame. So. Yeah, that'll be an interesting one. But
funny enough, I went on a recruiting trip to Lafayette in Pennsylvania before. So yeah,
I never went on a recruiting trip there, but I've been there because when I was at Muhlenberg is very close to Lehigh and Lafayette, and our head coach knew their coaches really well, so we would go over there and the head coach of Lehigh,
cool, man, like that big hill that it's on and everything. You have to go up. It's
really pretty country. It is really pretty country. And Lehigh's head coach at the time is the cat that is I'm drawing a blank on the name. The cat that's the special teams coordinator at South Carolina now. I'm completely drawing a blank on his name. Pete Lembo. Yeah. He was the head coach at Ball State. Yeah, he was the head coach there. I can't remember the name of the Lafayette coach. I think he retired. But
I don't even remember who it was when I visited there. I have no idea.
Yeah. But very good academics there. Very good academics there, no doubt.
Yeah, it was a little above my education grade, but we did all right.
There you go.
Tommy Guds, Crocs and Glocks. What's up, Tommy? More mailbag, fellas. What is your favorite game app on your phone that you play when doing things like waiting for the wife while she's shopping and whatnot?
I don't. Okay, so can I cheat a little bit, Tommy? I don't have any apps on my phone that I play. What I do play apps on my iPad though, just because I'm old and I just apps on my phone are too small. I can't read them. But on my phone, there's actually a couple, or on my iPad, there's actually a couple games that I'll play when I'm bored or when I'm in my other office. If you catch my drift. But the Transformers is one. That's one that I'll play. There's a Transformers game. Risk is another one. You can actually play Risk on there. It's not as cool as the old computer game Risk. And then the other one, I found a game called it's called Tap Nations, and it's like a world domination game. That's not a lot to it, but it's time consuming. So and those are really the ones that I'll play a little bit. Now my other iPad has like a couple baseball games on it, like Home Run Derby and another one, but they're kind of boring, so I don't play them a bunch. Be honest with you.
I have Taps Baseball on my phone that I play once in a blue moon. I mean, it's just like a little game.
Is that the one where they pitch it and you can like yeah, I think I have that one too. I know what you're talking about. Like you're never on defense, you only hit.
Yes, you only
right?
hit.
Yeah.
You only hit.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I've played that one before.
And it's very easy. It's very easy. I love it.
I've even tried up in the level difficulty, but like, you'll play and win like 70-2. It's like, okay, this is just,
yes,
come on.
yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you're like all your guys are batting like 550 with
I know,
like
right? Like,
home runs. Like,
oh my
come
gosh.
on, man.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, could you make this a little bit tougher, please? Yeah.
We had a question from Tatted Up Irishman. Could you see any scenario where Tyler Buckner returns to Notre Dame in 2024? Would he be welcomed?
I highly doubt both of those.
Yes.
I mean, not that they dislike him, but like, bro, you left. If things didn't work out for you, you don't get to come back here. I would be surprised by that one. I'd be very surprised by that one. Nor do I think it would make sense for Notre Dame. Look, bro, you had your chance to stay. You left.
I don't think it would make sense for either side at that point, to be honest. Like, it would just be very clunky situation. Because if you're coming back to Notre Dame also, Brian, that means that things didn't go very well at Alabama that 1 year. So you also missed a year of development potentially.
Right.
You know what I mean? So yeah.
Right. Yeah, I don't see that one. I don't see that one.
We have the next question from JWick13. What changed with Christian Gray to bring him back into the fold? It seemed like that was a decade ago already. It really does.
Just the newness wore off. The glitz and the glamour wore off, and Christian got back to what he really cared about, and the things that he cared about were Notre Dame things. Look, the DBU thing mattered because who's the debate of the modern DBU between? It's between LSU and Ohio State. Like,
yes.
not if we're talking all time, Miami's in there. We're talking about just DBU's more of a recent thing, right? It's LSU and Ohio State. I mean, that's who the conversation is. And so that intrigued him. And then, of course, his former high school head coach got hired at LSU. That had a role in it as well. But Notre Dame just stayed consistent, just stayed steady, just kept the message steady. They didn't panic. They didn't do anything to get themselves in trouble. They just stayed steady. And I remember being told this is like, he's a Notre Dame kid. He just doesn't know it yet. And they just kept on it and kept reminding him of that. And ultimately, that's the school that made the most sense for him. But when you're a DB and Miami or LSU and Ohio State are coming after you, and your head coach just got hired at LSU, that's going to matter.
Yeah.
That's why you stay in the fight. You can be consistent with your message. You keep building the relationship. You make them a priority. You don't overreact and panic, and you stay the course. And they did that with Christian, and it worked out great. And they ended up getting him into class.
Yep.
So, it made a lot of sense.
Sure did. Luckily, Notre Dame has him and his family, which are tremendous.
He's very good. Yeah.
Yes.
So did I tell you I got a chance to meet his mom finally face to face at the spring game? That was really cool. Yeah, that's very cool. Got a big old hug. That was cool.
That's awesome.
I got to meet a lot of moms and dads at that game, so that was interesting.
We had a question.
Most were happy. Most were cool. Some weren't necessarily happy.
As long as it's respectful on the night.
Yeah, they were great. I mean, there was a mom and dad that thought I was a little too hard on their kid, but they were totally cool about it. They were really nice.
That's great.
Yeah, very nice. And the dad's not someone who I would necessarily want to be on the bad side of. You know who I'm talking about.
There's a few of them, man. There's a few of those guys in the Notre Dame dad club, like, honestly.
Yeah, some big dudes. Yeah.
Yes, there are. And there's a question here from Douglas Road Roundabouts. Says, do you think Kenny Minchie will overtake Steve Angeli as the backup quarterback? If so, when? By first game, midseason, etc.
I honestly don't have a clue. Can he do it? Absolutely. Do I think he will? At some point, eventually, I think so. But look, Kenny, I don't know enough about Kenny's work ethic yet to know that he'll do it. Because the one thing about Steve is going to work. And I'm not saying Kenny Minchie won't work. I'm just saying I don't know enough about it yet. He hasn't been through a summer workout program. He's been through spring. He developed. He did some nice things. Tim said yesterday on the show that he had heard that Kenny had a really good scrimmage the week before the Blue Gold game. Didn't play well in the Blue Gold game, but I didn't think Steve played that well either. I mean, they were both kind of running for their lives a little bit, and the pass rush or the pass protection wasn't great. He's a more talented kid than Steve, in my opinion. But that doesn't always mean you're the better quarterback.
Yep.
So that's kind of what he's got to figure out. I don't know.
Shall see.
So Antoine Johnson said not defensive back for Ohio State, at least not recently. I mean, what recently are we talking about? I mean, in 2015, they had like 4 starters that were all like first or second round draft picks. I mean, Jeffrey Okudah was a number 4 overall draft pick, 3-4 years ago, right?
I mean, so was a high draft pick.
I mean, so the last
Denzel
couple
Ward
years,
is a stud,
right? Yeah. I mean, that's right. Denzel Ward was wasn't he a top 5 pick as well?
Top 10 at least, maybe top 5. You might be right.
So, I mean, if you're going to say the last couple years, maybe, but I mean, it's not that long ago, 2020. Jeff Okudah is the number 3 overall pick, and Damon Arnett goes in the first round. They shouldn't have, but he did.
Should not have. Yeah, that was such a Raiders pick.
Yeah, it was such a dumb pick. 2018, Jeffrey Okudah or Denzel Ward was the number 4 overall pick in that draft.
He's a stud, man.
2017, Marshawn Latimer, Malik Hooker, Jerry Conley all went in the first round. 2016, Eli Apple's a first-round pick, and Von Bell was a second-round pick. So, the last couple of years they haven't produced as many. But who else? I mean, who would you say is ahead of them? I mean, you could maybe argue Alabama, but I wouldn't go there.
Antoine, also, just look at the mock drafts, man. Denzel Burke is going first round next year, man. Just watch.
This is what drives me nuts about Ryan, because he lays on the sarcasm with a very serious look on his face.
Come on, man. Yes, have you not seen Denzel Burke, future first round pick Denzel Burke? Have you not seen him, Antoine?
Yeah.
Let's be serious, man. I say no sarcasm intended at all. He's a stud. Yes.
You're even being sarcastic when you're saying no sarcasm, and I don't like
no sarcasm, man. He's an absolute stud. Best corner in college football, probably right now.
Okay, stop saying not sarcasm when you're clearly being sarcastic. Oh. All right, here's the next one.
Tim B said, hot take. Justin Scott and Elijah Rushing to Notre Dame with Carr, CJ Carr, and Cam Williams, and that would be 4 5 stars in the class. Not too shabby.
I'll take it. I mean, that's definitely a hot take.
Yeah,
I'm not going to say, like, oh, you're nuts, you're wrong. I mean, I hope you're right. I hope you're right. We'll see. I hope you're right.
Very unlikely, but yes, if that happens, I will be very, very happy, to say the least.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wrapped it off. Says, is it just me? But I'm concerned about opening up with Navy. I feel preparing for the option in training camp so early may hurt the development of the defense when we face traditional offenses. I actually like that we get it out of the way.
Yeah. I don't love playing Navy first, but it's just it's for reasons. I mean, it's just personal preference. I'll say this, Rob, because Notre Dame always spends several days in fall camp on the triple option anyway. So you're really only adding an extra 3 or 4 days of triple option practice, to be honest with you, because game week's was going to be about whatever anyway. So it's not like Notre Dame is going to spend half a fall camp working on the triple option. They're not. I mean, that's just not how it works. So I understand where you're coming from, Rob. I just don't think they're going to spend as much time on it as maybe you do. And I think there are some things that you can work on, to me, that can be beneficial to you from a development standpoint, Ryan, which is you got to really work on assignment correctness. You've got to work on block destruction. You got to work on, keeping guys, there's really locking in on your keys in the pass game, because
ankles.
They may only throw on you 5 times, but those 5 times could get completed twice for 90 yards. You know what I mean? Like,
we saw it last year. There was one big play against, who was it? Cam Hart. I think it was on the one, maybe.
Where he got sucked in. He was looking, peeking in the backfield, and guy ran by him, and so the level of discipline that you have to have when playing against that team, there are benefits to that, even though some of the techniques and the alignments aren't going to be the same. So I understand where you're coming from. I just don't think it hurts them. And I'm more sympathetic to the argument that it's good to play them early than I am to the argument that it's bad to play them this early. I think if I had to pick between the two, it's good to get it out of the way. I just would rather play it like later in the year when you've got a bye afterwards.
I also like the fact that it's not like you're rolling from Navy into Ohio State, right? You're going from Navy to Tennessee State.
Right.
Then you have NC State. Then you have Central Michigan. Like, you have time to recover from the triple option hangover to begin the year. Like, you have some.
Here's the reason why I don't like playing them in the opener. I don't disagree with any of the reasons that you're going to get it out of the way. I get all that.
Yep.
My problem is I feel like when you have 2, and this is also why I hate having a bye week before you play Navy. I think the mistake defensive coordinators make when they have more time to prepare for Navy is they put too much in. And I just feel like make it simple, right? You have 3-4 different options. You go with it. It's about discipline. It's about your dudes are better than their dudes. Your guys got to know what they're doing. You can't just have like 1 or 2 calls. You can't do that. But I feel like have a good week of preparation, be really sound with your technique, have some checks and calls based on what they do, and then just go play and just be fast and physical and force them to declare, force them to get the balls out quickly, things like that. Take the fullback out of the game. Where sometimes you see when they have like too much time to prepare, they try to get cute, and that's how you get in trouble. And against a triple is when you try to get cute. Like if I had 2 weeks to prepare, I would have those 3 or 4 checks and calls, the stuff I said, Ryan, and then I would just perfect it as best I can instead of putting in a bunch of different stuff in.
Get your assignment done, baby, and move on. That's all it is, man. Like, it's not going to ever be pretty, but inside linebackers, you have dive. Defensive tackles, you have dive. Defensive ends, you have quarterback at all times. Safeties to corners, quarterback to pitch. Like, it's just responsibilities are so big as a triple option, man. Don't overcomplicate that. Like, at the core, you're right, Brian. You can't do the same thing over and over again. But at the core, though, you have to be assignment sound against a triple option, and you just got to shut down the assignment. That's just all it comes down to.
Yep. All right. Here we go.
Jason says, assuming that we land Sean Civillano, what would be your best plan B for potentially losing out with Rushing and Justin Scott? Anyone on the board? I know you just put a piece out on this, Brian.
Yeah, not really. I mean, look, if they'd be willing to stop at 4. I don't agree with that. I'd recruit Malachi Williams no matter what. I mean, I'm taking the next of him or Elijah that wants to come. I don't know that the staff feels the same way. I think they're going to focus on those 2 guys. Assuming you get Sean Sevillano, you're going to focus on those 2 guys. Take 1 or both if you can. Prefer, hopefully get at least 1 and then focus on 25. That's what I think their plan is. I don't necessarily agree with it because, like I said, I think Malachi Williams is a guy you recruit. You keep recruiting, and
kid's a stud, man. He's a stud.
Yep.
Yeah.
Here's a 2-part question, Ryan. From Saturdays are for doing laundry.
Are they? Okay. Howdy, fellas. Hi. Is the Notre Dame degree as one part of your recruiting pitch becoming a moot point with the top prospects now in the NIL era? I can see other schools driving the points that players can take, the easier route where they can focus on football, and if that doesn't work out, they'll have the NIL money to pay for the tuition of any school.
I'm going to say a couple things here. Number one, I think fans have a very misguided view of number one, how much money most of these kids are getting in NIL. I think there's just thought that like 100 kids are getting like millions of dollars. They're not.
Yeah.
Number one. Number two, I think there's this misguided view that because you would maybe take, like somebody says, well, how do you turn down that kind of money? Well, people do it all the time. You know what I mean? Like not everyone views maximizing my dollar amount now as the only priority. And even though this may not make sense in any other way, I'm getting paid. So not everybody thinks that way. And a lot of these kids are smart enough to know, and they're being told this by NFL players and other guys. Hey, man, go where you're going to have the best chance to be doing up the NFL first and foremost. And if a school offering you the most money won't do that, don't do it. Now, some kids are still going to do that. Jaden Rashada literally made his college decision off of who was going to give him the most money. Very short-sighted. Most kids aren't that way because they understand that the big money is going to happen by getting the NFL.
Well,
right?
Can I give you an example, Brian? I just recorded Carson's Corner for next week with Carson Hobbs, and he actually we talked a little bit about the NIL thing, and he said that the pull for Notre Dame is that the generational wealth that you are going to get from playing in the NFL or from the degree of Notre Dame was a whole lot more important for him than what the handoff from what the handout is to begin. And he basically said that he thinks that some people are too involved in that. I mean, so yes, to your point, some kids do believe that because literally I just talked to someone that believes that 100%. So
you and I both know of a kid that's in Notre Dame's 23 class that turned down a 7-figure deal. It was over a couple years, but it was like, but that's what most of these deals are.
Yeah.
The kid's getting an $8 million deal. He's not getting $8 million a year. He's getting $8 million over a period of time. And a lot of those deals are not. And here's the other thing too, you don't have to understand. This group of recruits in 24 are hearing all the horror stories from the 22 and 23 kids about what they were promised and aren't getting. And it's only going to get worse. Right.
Yeah.
Well, not even just that, Ryan, but kids that are going to school and not getting the money that they're being promised. And so that's partly why you're seeing some kids leave too. People's like, why'd this kid leave? Well, it may be a situation where that kid was promised money and he didn't get it. I also think most of these kids that Notre Dame is going to be recruiting, if a kid is that short-sighted, you weren't going to get him anyway. There was going to be some other reason he was going to go somewhere else. The vast majority of kids are not as short-sighted as you're saying. And the other part of it too is that would be a horrible recruiting pitch for other schools. Hey man, come here and don't worry about school. You'll get a chance to go back and get your degree somewhere else. Like the vast majority of kids are going to be like, hold on a second. Like, that's all I am to you. I'm just a guy you're going to come use up. And if it doesn't work out, I can go somewhere else to get my degree because you're going to give me millions of dollars. First of all, I don't know that you're going to give me that money. Second of all, if a kid gets $1 million offer, if somebody says, hey, this kid got $1 million deal, most likely what that was, Ryan, is he got a 4 years at $250,000 a year deal. That's what he got. That's not generational wealth, folks. It's not. That's a small signing bonus for a first or second round draft pick. You know what I mean? So that's just not how most kids view it. It's a horrible recruiting pitch from the other schools. The Notre Dame degree part will never fade as long as the Notre Dame degree still has value. And the kids that care about academics, it will still be a selling point for them. It will not be the ultimate decision maker in a lot of instances because the football piece has to make sense too. And I totally get that. Like as great of a degree of a school that Notre Dame is, they're not elite in every degree program. So there are certain tracks that you may want to do in school where you're going to say, you know what, Notre Dame is a phenomenal school, but I'm going to go to this smaller school because this particular track of what I want to study happens to be considered better there, or makes more sense because the state that I want to live in tends to hire from the in-state schools for this teacher program than they would if I went and got a degree from Notre Dame. Yeah, who knows? I mean, so you always have to factor in those type of things. And these kids are football players, and that's basically their major. And that doesn't mean they don't care about degrees and all that, but when I say major, it's their chosen profession is to be athletes. They're going to still look at the top kids are still going to look at a place that can develop them. And that's what we've said all along. If Notre Dame starts winning and developing first and second round draft picks at a higher level, that will be the thing that will get these kids start coming, because I do think they value the degree part. But as Marcus Freeman has said, you can't just be one of three in those three big areas: education, NFL, championships. Can't just be one in three of those. You got to be 3 for 3 if you're going to get the majority of the top players in the country. Start doing that, and all of a sudden you're going to find yourself winning a lot more games.
Check boxes, baby. Check boxes.
Speaking of that, I think this is perfect timing into this segueing into this question, Ryan.
Benjamin Carchi says, we talk about the effect of Notre Dame as a program if they win the title. I want to get your thoughts on college football as a whole if Notre Dame wins the title.
Well, I think the only thing that changes, first of all, we've talked about Notre Dame, as he said. I don't think a lot changes for college football other than there's a new big dog you've got to negatively recruit against, or you have to be prepared to handle. It's no different than if all of a sudden Florida State becomes a power again, or USC becomes a power again, or Texas becomes a power again. Miami, it doesn't change anything for you other than now this is the school I have to worry about.
There's a new target out there.
Yeah, like what I don't think, what I don't think will happen is you won't see all these coaches in school say, you know what, we should make sure our kids are going to class too. We should make sure that we're getting, no, what they'll do is we need to sell that better, even though we don't really care. You know what I mean? We need to at least sell the pitch of academics because Notre Dame is going to kill us with this now that they're winning championships, right? So now it becomes, so the recruiting pitches change even if the schools foundationally don't change. The recruiting pitch would change, but that's all just because, hey, that's the new big dog on the block, and we've got to worry about them now. So it's no different than when any other school gets good. For the rest of college football, I think it's obviously huge for Notre Dame. It's a statement that, hey, you can win doing it the right way, but most people don't care about that. There's a lot of Notre Dame fans that don't care about that. I just had this conversation with somebody yesterday, somebody that I've had a lot of conversation with, and he's like, Notre Dame needs to be cutting players and doing all this stuff because that's the way it is now. I'm like, so? I was like, there's a lot of things that you could say are now socially acceptable that are still freaking wrong and shouldn't be things that you should do. Just because it's socially acceptable doesn't mean it's right for you to do. If you're someone who has a moral compass, it's the same thing here. Like, I don't care if that means it's easier to win. I'd rather not win that way. Yep. I'd rather win the right way. And if Notre Dame goes out there and wins 2 of the next 3 titles, you're not going to see all of a sudden a bunch of coaches saying, you know what, we should not cheat anymore. We should not. No, they're not going to do that. Just say, well, we got to cheat against Notre Dame now. That's the team we got to cheat against to beat now. That's all that's going to change. It's not going to change anything else as far as I think it's college football as a whole.
I think especially when it's because it's Notre Dame, it's still a big brand, right? It's not like if you would have said something different, Benjamin, like a random team that has never been a national power or a blue blood is like all of a sudden, I think that might change the formula a little bit because then you're like, oh, maybe teams are kind of rethinking how to become that next team, right? So if like Minnesota was a team that's all of a sudden they're like one of the best teams in college football, it's like, well, how'd that happen? Like that's crazy. Like that's a little bit different, but a Notre Dame, a Miami, a Florida State, like those types of teams, they've been here before. It's like you could just kind of phrase it as cyclical at that point, you know? Like, so I just think that is if it's a team, especially that has just kind of been there in the past, it doesn't really change anything because they've had the formula in the past. It just hasn't happened in X amount of years for whatever reason.
Right. All right, here we go.
Bailey Brad says, why do you think Notre Dame is recruiting so much better at defensive end and defensive tackle this cycle? Will it become a trend or just a one-off?
It's a great question. I think there's a couple factors in it. I think
edge is a little better than interior defensive line.
Yeah, and it's that way in most years, Ryan. Yeah. I mean, if we're being honest, a lot of the I don't know that I could explain to you the reasons why, but NFL draft-wise, there just haven't been a lot of great interior defensive line classes in recent years. I don't know if it's because teams are now taking the former 6'3", 320-pounders and turning them into offensive linemen now. I don't know the answer to that. I really don't. It's just deeper. I think that the geography aspect of it matters a little bit. You know, a lot of the best players are from certain regions and things like that Notre Dame doesn't have a ton of success with. But then you can say, well, so are the defensive ends, but there's so many more of them that a Cole Mullins gets, overlooked in Georgia. Logan Thomas gets a little bit overlooked in Texas. And, you're able to find some more of those guys. But I also think too, part of it is you're a little benefit. It's been a benefit to you that some of the guys that are in this class are like a Logan Thomas, and from a personality standpoint, that he's more prone to the type of message that works for Notre Dame. Cole Mullins is more prone to that message. And then of course you had a legacy, the son of a legacy, or, a legacy recruit in Bryce Young. So I think those are reasons for it. I mean, just more players to choose from and just better fits, in my opinion.
Sometimes things are just random too, right? Mm-hmm. Where it's just like that just didn't work out. That for whatever reason, it is what it is. I mean, it could be a different year, it could be a different coach, it's just a lot of different factors. I think, Bailey Brad.
Yep. All right.
Another question from Tyler, Misguided Passion Binge. So one of the best nicknames there. Is there a ceiling difference between a 3-star and a 5-star? I think most assume a 3-star and a 5-star, the ceiling and the floor will always be different.
There can be. There can be. There are some 3 stars that you're like, no, that's who he is, right? I mean, he's just going to be a nice, solid role player. There's other 3 stars that you look and say, boy, that guy is raw now and he may not ever do a thing, but boy, if that guy pans out, he's going to be really good. Those guys tend to have, a ceiling that's like we've said this before. Malachi Williams is not a guy that I would necessarily put in the top 100 right now. Just because he's raw, but man, his ceiling is as high as any defensive end I've seen in this class. Yep. It's just, is he going to get to it or not is a little bit of a greater question than Keon Keeley. Keon Keeley is like, he's going to be pretty flipping good the minute he steps foot on campus. That's really what it comes down to for me is the biggest difference between the 3-star with the high ceiling is simply the floor. That's the difference. It's whether it's a technical thing or a body thing or a guy was overlooked, who knows? But all these things, there's no absolutes in this, Tyler. There's none. So it just depends on the prospect we're talking about. But if a guy is a 3-star with a 5-star upside, he's probably shouldn't be a 3-star. That's the other part of it. If we're going to stick to this, but I've done that before, Ryan. I've had a couple kids that I gave. I remember Trevor Ruland. Remember him that played Notre Dame?
Yes. Yep.
He's a guy that I gave like a 3.5-star grade to with a 5-star upside, because I said this kid is a phenomenal high school offensive lineman. I just don't know that it's going to project to the next level as well, because I had questions about his size, ability to hold up. And, so there was a lot of projectability there. Well, one of the issues that Trevor had is he was a really quick, explosive young lineman, but as he got to 290 to 300, and he had some injuries, a lot of that quickness went away, and he wasn't. Now, he was still a solid starter in his 1 year as a starter for Notre Dame. But that's the reason that you grade a kid like that way, because I can't give him a 5-star grade because he's 6'3", 250 pounds, right? But man, the film was really impressive. So, but I'll give you the upside, because if you can, some kids can go from 6'3", 250 to 6'3", 300 and be just as good. Some can't. Some can't go from 275 to 300 and keep their athleticism. And that's partly why I created the system that I have, because you got to be able to differentiate between what a kid is now and what a kid can be. And that system works for me. And so usually kids like that have some sort of major question mark about, and a lot of it usually has to do with size. Honestly, Ryan, is when you're going to get that big of a difference, 3-star, 5-star ups, 3-star player, 5-star upside, it's usually because the kid's like a 6'5", 200-pound defensive end. But you're like, this kid's so athletic and so long. He's got tons of skill, but he's 6'5", 200 pounds and doesn't know how to use his hands yet. I can't make him a 4-star or 5-star player. But I'm going to tell you something right now. This kid goes to the right system with the right strength program. He's got really broad shoulders, long fingers, big feet. Like, you look at those kids, say that kid's going to develop. He could end up being a stud, but I just can't put him there now because he's so far away from being that. Where you look at Keon Keeley and you're like, that dude can play for me right now. Jason Moore can play for me right now, right? That's the difference. Where Boubacar Traore could end up being every bit as good as Jason Moore, if not better. He could. But there's a big gap between them right now. Yes. And that's why that ranking exists. All right, let's get to. We got to wrap this up. Try to get to most of these, but we're gonna have to hustle up and get some of these out of here, folks. I'm sorry.
Patrick Earwood says, why does Notre Dame not recruit Alabama much at all? I just graduated from Thompson High School, and I was talking to the DB coach, and he said Notre Dame never comes down here.
Well, it's not never, but it's not often. And honestly, it's because you've got to be smart about where your resources are going. You can't recruit everywhere.
Yeah.
And
you'll still hear them with the Cameron Pruitts and the KJ Lacey's and such. Yeah.
But they got no traction with Cam Pruitt. None.
Nope. Zero. Yeah.
They went down and saw Bradley Shaw.
Yep.
But the reality is a couple things, Ryan, is the school systems aren't as good. And so it's going to make it harder to recruit some guys. You're going to have a hard time getting some traction with a lot of those kids. And end of the day, even if you get one of those kids, what if Bama decides to come call in November, right? There's always going to be that fear too. So it's just about you're making a decision based off a lot of factors that says it's just going to be harder for us to the time we'd have to spend in Alabama, looking at it from if I'm the recruiting coordinator or the head coach, the time we'd have to spend in that state getting difference makers is not necessarily worth the investment based on the likelihood that we get those kids and the likelihood we can keep them if Bama or Auburn or somebody else comes calling. That's the reality of it.
I also don't know how the school systems are in Alabama. I don't know if it's like it's not great fit.
I mean, every school's different. Every state has, like, Mississippi will have some good high schools, but it's ranked as one of the near the bottom almost every year. And when it comes to the education, all the standards, right? Doesn't mean that there aren't some very good students there. Deuce Knight's one, right? Doesn't mean that there aren't some high schools that are really good. It just means overall it's a little harder. Like, that was one of the challenges that we had recruiting Fort Wayne. Now, Indiana is known as a state that has good academic system, but depends on which part of the state you're going to. If you're going into the city schools in Fort Wayne, I can tell you firsthand experience, I saw a lot of bad transcripts at that high school. A lot of bad transcripts. If I go over to South Bend, Washington, I'm going to find some really bad transcripts That's why but I go out to Penn, and it's a little different deal. And that's true of every state. The states that are good and bad. There's goods and bads, but some states there's just fewer kids that are going to fit. And Alabama actually produces a lot of quality players per capita. It's actually one of the best. It's just you've got the big dog in that state, and if they want a kid, they're probably going to get him. And the schools that get those kids out are usually schools that it's going to cost you to get that kid to not go to Bama. And so there are just a lot of factors that go into it, in my opinion, that why, it doesn't mean that they're afraid to go in there. It's just you're going to be more selective with it, like they are with, like you said, Cam Pruitt, KJ Lacey, guys like that. It's just it's a tough one. It's a tough sell. And they've looked at Justin Tuck was from Alabama, I believe. Jarius Jackson was from Mississippi. I mean, they've had some guys there. It's just it's going to be more of a anomaly than anything else.
Good. Next question from DLKALL01.
DLCal01. I don't know.
DLCal01. Notre Dame decided to go all in on Dante Moore and likely passed on Chris Vizina. Not true. Love Kenny Minchie, but Dante Moore and Vizina had strong springs. Did Notre Dame adjust their approach to recruiting quarterbacks so they land another CJ Carr in 2025? They did not pass on Chris Vizina. There was no
this notion that he was going to commit to them, and they said no. Now, did Notre Dame pass on Chris Vizina from the standpoint of once they got a silent commit from Dante, they stopped recruiting him? Sure. But they
didn't not take a commitment from Chris Vizina.
They didn't turn. Now, they did pass on Jackson Arnold, and I'm fine with that because, honestly, I think Kenny Minchie's a better player. I think Jackson Arnold's severely overrated, but different story for a different day. They didn't pass on him like he was going to commit tomorrow. And even at the time, it was he's going to visit and he's going to commit. I never bought that. I thought could they have gotten Chris Vizina if they stayed on him? Potentially.
Possible. Yeah.
But Clemson was always going to be very hard to beat. Always, especially once they got CJ Carr was going to make Notre Dame even tougher sell for them. So I have no problem with their strategy last year once they got Kenny Minchie. I mean, look, because you can't get a Dante Moore if you don't put on. I'll say it again, Ryan. The only problem that I had with quarterback recruiting last year is that the only criticism that I think is fair is that you didn't figure it out sooner.
Yeah.
That this was that the dad was going to be just an obstacle you couldn't overcome. Right? That's the only complaint that I have is the timing of when they moved on. But when they moved on from Dante, when they got a commitment from a 5-star and CJ Carr. And so, and look, they made a run at Kenny Minchie at that time. Kenny just wanted to stay at Pitt. The other factor is you look, you got to shoot for the stars. The quarterback's too important of a position. And the only way you're going to get those guys is if you let them feel like they're a priority. That's the only way that you're going to do it. Yep. And they still recruited Chris Vizina. But again, when Dante commits to you, what are you supposed to do? Assume he's lying and recruit other players? I mean, that's the tough spot that you're in. And that's why I'd say the only complaint that I have is that maybe, and this is hindsight 2020 stuff, maybe you should have figured it out a little bit sooner that his dad was going to be a problem. So that's all I would say. Yep. And in April, when he just would not come back to campus in April and May, that should have been your, okay, we need to move on a little sooner. And
read the actions, buddy.
Exactly.
Read the actions. Yep.
Exactly.
Next question's from Salty Virginia Peanuts. Says Texas has produced the most NFL talent, so recruiting it makes sense. But historically, how well have Texas kids done at Notre Dame compared to kids from other states?
Done pretty well, actually. Notre Dame has had some great players from Texas. I mean, one that stands out to me is obviously Tim Brown. Yes. But they've had some. I mean, some positions are better than others, right?
Bobby Taylor was from Texas.
Taylor's from Texas. Yeah. David Givens was from Texas. Robin Weber, remember him? He's the guy that caught that pass against Alabama in I think it was the Cotton Bowl, Orange Bowl. I forget which one it was, out of the end zone. You've got Mike Gandy was a really good player for them. Burt Berry, Capron Lewis Moore, Cedric Hilliard, Grant Irons, Jimmy Friday, Anthony Denman, Johnny Sanders, Vontaze Duff, and Jerome Sapp. So that great 2002 secondary that Notre Dame had, Remember that? 2 of those guys were from Texas, Jerome Sapp and Vontaze Duff. Greg Lane was a really good defensive back, multi-year starter. Yesterday, I was talking about how I couldn't remember who the starting cornerback was opposite of Tom Carter. And somebody in the chat later said it was Greg Lane. Well, Greg Lane was the right answer. He was from Texas. Tyree Harrison, somebody just put in there. Chris Stewart's another guy. Alan Rossum is a guy from Texas. So they've actually had pretty good success from the state of Texas. Notre Dame has. Now, again, they haven't recruited a million players from Texas, but guys they have were, and those are just guys from my era. I mean, if you read, Lou Samoji wrote an article about this a few years ago before he passed. And he's got guys like Christy Flanagan at running back who played for Newt Rockne, was a 2-time All-American. I don't remember him. Coy McGee was a guy from Texas that came to Notre Dame. He was on Lou's list. That was back in the 40s. I don't remember him. But Lou remembers all that stuff, and he's got some guys. He's got Dave Huffman and Tim Huffman from Dallas in the 70s. They were 2 guys. Jordan Black's another one that was from – I do remember him. But he's got some interesting guys on this list. A 1946 second-team All-American George Strohmeyer was from there. That's from the article from Lou. I'm reading from Lou's article. So yeah, they've had some guys, man. They've had some good players from the state of Texas, and have had success at Notre Dame. Corey Robinson recently was a guy. Torrey Hunter, and without Durham Smythe, Brock Wright.
Yeah.
So yeah, they've had good success from Texas. Guys have come and been good football players. They've been good football players.
And so a couple pretty good ones in the spring from Texas at wide receiver as well. So, yeah,
that's right. Yeah, it's 3 from last year. So it's makes a lot of sense. And I mean, and Ohio State's made a killing in the state of Texas in the last decade with skill players. I mean, Garrett Wilson, J.K. Dobbins 1-2 punch is pretty good.
Jackson Smith and Jigba.
Yeah. And he's your 3.
Yes.
In that conversation. So
they technically signed Quinn Ewers as well. So
that's right. And we all knew how that one was going to end up. Yeah. Good question though, Salty. That's a good question about Texas, because it's one thing to get kids from a state, but do those kids actually come to your state and pan out? That's a very important part of the conversation, Ryan. Very important part.
Call Me Ty says, would you be opposed to Audric Estime getting the old school bell cow role 80% of the carries?
Yes, I would. I've said this, and I've said this for over a year. Audric has to prove to me he can be a 50 snap, 20 plus carry guy. He wasn't that way last. He would wear down a little bit quicker. There's a long discussion in the chat about why that might be. I'm not diving into that. Medically, I have no clue what that could be. I just don't think it's a smart idea in today's game, especially the depth you have, to have a running back taking 80% of your carries for a school like Notre Dame. Some kids can do it. I just don't think you need to. Now, here's the deal.
The talent coming back as well.
So. Here's the deal, though, Ryan. Will there be some games where he's going to get 80% of my carries? Sure. If I need him to carry the ball 90% of the time to beat Ohio State, then guess what? I'm going to make sure he carries the ball 90%. But you know what he's not going to do? Carry the ball 25 times the week before against Central Michigan. You know what I mean?
Tennessee State or
right.
Exactly.
Right. Yep. So there may be some individual games, Call Me Ty, that I would say you're going to ride him as much as you can, but over the course of the season, you've got to balance that out, in my opinion. That's just and plus I want him fresh November 4th to play Clemson. I don't want to wear him down by the time you get there. I don't want to do that.
Next question from University of Southern Clowntown. Brian, I know you love the military stuff.
I love that name, by the way. I love how you just pass over that. University of Southern Clowntown. That's phenomenal, by the way.
I was just making sure I read it correctly, man.
Yes.
Brian, I know you love the military stuff. Have you ever seen Terminal List or read any of the Jack Carr's books?
So I have seen Terminal List. That's the one with Chris. What's the guy's name? Chris. There's so many different famous. The one that's from Guardians of the Galaxy. What's his last name?
Oh, Chris Pratt.
Chris Pratt.
Yeah,
I thought it was really good. I have not read any of Jack Carr's books. So for those of you who don't know, Jack Carr is actually a former Navy SEAL who actually now writes books. I have bought a lot of Jack Carr's books because my mom likes that genre of book. She's a very productive reader. She reads a lot. And so it's like, I'll buy her like 5 books, and a month later, she's like, you got any more books from? I'm like, seriously? How do you find time? You run a business. How do you find time to read all these books?
Caitlin does the same stuff. She'll read a whole book in like a day and a half. And it's like, how do you do that, man? It's
she
gross.
loves it, man.
Yeah.
She says she loves Jack Carr's books. So I bought her all the books that he's written so far. And he's a pretty new author. He hasn't written a ton, but the Terminal List was, I enjoyed that. I think it was on Amazon Prime before I got rid of Amazon Prime. But yeah, he was, she loves his books. I couldn't tell you because I haven't read them, but I thought Terminal List was really good. Really good. I was a big fan of that. Big fan of that.
Next question from BM12310. Brian and Ryan, would you rather have an elite quarterback surrounded by a solid team or an average quarterback surrounded by an elite team? Second one.
I'd rather the second one. I think Georgia the last 2 years is a perfect example of that. I mean, look, we've talked a lot about the team. I mean, think about the quarterbacks who've won a championship since 2010 when Brian Kelly arrived, right? Cam Newton, Jameis Winston, Deshaun Watson, Trevor Lawrence, Joe Burrow, Mac Jones, elite college quarterbacks, right? Here's who else has won titles in that time. Cardell Jones.
That's 12 gauge to you. 12
Jacob Coker.
Yeah.
AJ McCarron. Not a bad quarterback. I wouldn't call AJ McCarron average. He wasn't great.
Yeah,
he was surrounded by great players.
Yep.
Stetson Bennett, and I mean a combination of Jalen Hurts and Tua Tagovailoa was pretty good, but Jalen Hurts wasn't an elite college quarterback. So it's not only, but what did those teams that won with those guys? What were they, Ryan? Loaded everywhere else.
Yep.
They were elite teams around that quarterback. Jacob Coker played very well in the title game. But it was just kind of like, don't screw it up, you know. And there's some wide open, like they had OJ Howard came free twice. Lane Kiffin made one of the best calls I've ever seen in that game, and I can't remember what exactly happened, but I remember it was one of the calls he made to get OJ Howard open. That I was like, oh, I love that call. Do you remember it, Ryan? I was like, I think it was the second half of the game. I have to go back and watch it again. But you know, you didn't win, but you weren't in that title game because of Jacob Coker. You were in that. Right. His job was to manage the offense. And that's basically all it was.
And he did.
Here, last two, Ryan, and we're going to wrap this up for these last two questions because we got to get running.
Ben Tarnowski says, if the ACC does lose teams and ends up being a lower level conference, where do you see Notre Dame's other teams going? It's a fascinating question.
It's I mean, it's a good. I don't really know the answer to that. Maybe the Big East. I mean.
For some sports, yeah.
I mean, most of their sports could go to the Big East. I mean, hockey's going to stay in the Big Ten, but most of their sports could go to the Big East. They might join the Big Ten for all those other sports, to be honest with you. I could see that. So I think Big East and Big Ten would be most likely fits if the ACC, for some reason. Part of it, too, is does the ACC go away? If they just lose two schools, that doesn't necessarily mean that the ACC is going to go away. They could go poach a couple AAC schools, and Notre Dame decides they still want to be in it. But if like the ACC kind of basically goes away because they lose like 5 or 6 schools, sure, 4 to 5, 6 schools, and they're going to have to find another home. Yeah, and I think Big Ten and Big East would make the most sense at that point in time, Ryan. Yeah. And here's a two-part question, actually two-part question from different people.
Okay.
And I think the second question was a follow-up. So the first one is Bailey Brad says Ryan Day recruits haven't been great. And I believe Kyle Wade's comment was related to this, but he said 10 of 10 on the boldness scale, perhaps. This is a very intriguing topic and conversation. So Bailey Brad said Ryan Day recruits haven't been great. I'll give my thoughts, and I'm very curious to hear what you have to say.
Mm-hmm.
I think Ryan Day's recruits have been really good. Here's the problem that I think we've seen from Ryan Day. They've recruited a lot of studs. He says cornerback recruiting is what he's saying too. But I think this is a bigger picture thing. I think it's true at corner and a lot of other positions. Ohio State has recruited a lot of highly ranked kids, a lot of very talented kids, and they've sent a lot of guys into the NFL in recent seasons. The problem is they haven't done a good enough job recruiting the offensive line. And I think the biggest problem that Ohio State has to do with there's a culture that does not promote the toughness you need to be a champion. I think that right there is the biggest reason that Lincoln Riley and Ryan Day, who are two of the best offensive minds in the game, have 0 titles. Because at the end of the day, in the games that have mattered most, the other teams have been tougher than you. And with Ryan Day, the further and further away he gets from Urban Meyer's tenure, the less physical and the less mentally tough those teams become. Because I don't think he's learned how to build that yet. Maybe he does. Guys can change. But that's been the biggest holdup for me. And we saw it again against Michigan this year. They got mentally and physically beat up by Michigan this year. Yep. Michigan doesn't have better players. They don't have better recruits. They have a culture that is designed to beat Ohio State. And you've said this before. Michigan has built their program to beat Ohio State. Ohio State's building their program to try to beat Alabama and Georgia. And I don't think they're doing it the right way. Because as we saw last year, Georgia at the end of the day was just they made a couple more plays in the trenches and with physicality and the front seven beating Ohio State's offensive line than Ohio State made on the other side of the ball. That's the biggest thing for me. It's not that their recruiting isn't good. It's just that, to me, they don't have the right culture and enough physical – because I think physical toughness leads to mental toughness and vice versa. They kind of go together for me. How do you get mentally tough? It's through being really pushed physically and mentally in those areas. That's the biggest problem for me with Ohio State, is just that lack of a physical identity. And I'm sitting there watching the second half of this game against Ohio State, against Michigan last year. I'm thinking, where's the fire? Who's pissed off for Ohio State right now that Michigan's running on them? It's like they were going through the motions. I mean, you've been building up this entire year towards this game because of how disrespectful Michigan was to you after the fact, and they clowned you for a whole year. They talked trash about you. They made fun of you, and this is the effort we see going into this game? This is how you respond to when Michigan punches you in the mouth? Really? This is who your team is, huh? Interesting. Okay. You can blame your assistant coaches or your players, but this is a you problem, cuz. This is a you problem. And until he figures out an answer to that, that's the thing that I think is going to keep Ohio State from being a team that can compete for champions. Now, look, they've been close. They were close in 2020. They lost in the title game. They were close last year. But at the end of the day, I just don't think they have the mental and physical toughness to do it, in my opinion. And until he can fix that, they're going to always fall short for some reason or another, in my opinion, Ryan.
Because it's not a lack of talent at all. I mean, it's not. I mean, I agree. I think the one spot that they have not recruited well enough, though, is offensive line. That's a spot that just says they've had some misses, man. I mean, it's like, okay, Josh Fryer and whoever else isn't playing that well in the spring. Let's find the next guy we recruited. Oh, wait, we don't really have that guy in the pipeline at the moment. That's a problem. That's a problem. But I mean, defensively, they've recruited some talented dudes. I mean, think about JT and Jack Sawyer and the corner. I mean, Denzel Burke is a talented kid. It's not about lack of talent with the Denzel Burke. It's just, for whatever reason, they haven't been developed properly. So I don't know, man. I'm interested to see what the second year under Jim Knowles looks like, for one, just to see if there instills anything. Because we have talked about second year under Jim Knowles is usually a lot better than the first year. So hopefully we'll see. I do think Justin Fry is a really good offensive line coach. So hopefully that takes a step forward. It's just very odd. I mean, I think that does trickle from the way down, though. Like, a team takes on a personality of their head coach a lot, right? And maybe that's just not a... I'm going to say it this way, because I don't think Ryan Day is a bad coach. I think Ryan Day is a good coach. But maybe Ryan Day is also a better offensive coordinator than he is a head coach. That's possible. Bingo. It's possible.
Right. That's why I think him and Urban were such a dynamic combination, because Urban could set the culture, set the toughness, set the way they're going to practice, and then Ryan Day can just go call plays and be really good and really dynamic. So that's going to do it. We did have a super chat from Nathan Milton. First questions, John A1. See you next week, buddy. So thank you, Nathan, for that. Thanks, everybody, for the questions. I know we didn't get a chance to get to all of them, but we got a ton of great questions, everybody. I want to thank all of you all for being with us this week. Hey, Ryan, just in case some things happen this weekend, good luck. If not, we'll obviously see you again on Monday before everything happens. But just want to thank you all very much. Have a safe weekend, everybody, okay? And then on Monday, it's obviously Memorial Day weekend. For all of you who have had family members that have served and who are no longer with us, whether they lost their lives in combat or like my grandfather were fortunate enough to come home but are now no longer with us. Just remember the fact that we can sit here and talk football in a free country still. As of today, we're still a free country. It's because of their sacrifice. I didn't have to fight. They fought in my place, and they gave the ultimate sacrifice so that we can live, in my opinion, the greatest, the most free country that humanity has ever known. And so all of you serving now, thank you for your service. But of course, Memorial Day is more to remember those who are no longer with us. And to them and their families, we thank you from the bottom of my heart for your sacrifice and for what you've given up so that we can be free and do fun things like talk football and not have to worry about a lot of things that people around the world have to worry about because they don't live in our country. So thank you for your service. You all have an amazing weekend. We will be back with you. We will have a recorded show, potentially a recorded show on Monday. We'll see. Going to depend on what's going on with that guy. We'll have to figure it out. But I'll definitely be back on Tuesday. Vince and I are going to be together on Tuesday, and we're going to kick off sort of our 2023 team sort of breakdown position by position, and we're going to kick things off, Ryan. You know where we're starting things, man. We're starting with the quarterbacks. So we'll definitely be back then. Have an awesome weekend, everybody, and we'll talk to you again very soon on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.